update on our project. Public Works has 19 different sites, and you kind of see that 8.5 by 11 of our patrol districts in front of you. It's really tough to read. If anybody wants a larger map, I can certainly send it. We have it in PDF. That's the map right there. It is difficult to read. It has all of the people in patrol districts on it. And again, if you want a larger one for your office or something like that, I can certainly get this blown up and delivered. The department manages 72 different buildings, and it goes from garages to salt sheds and warm storage, cold storage buildings. We've got it all. We will manage more buildings than property management does. We do that internally by ourselves, and we reach out for things that we don't have expertise in property management, but we basically do it all ourselves. There's the map that you have in front of you. Our Tier 1 campuses, Pike Lake, Ely, Hibbing, Virginia, Jean, Duluth, and Cook. Up on that slide there, and it's kind of tough to read. Pike Lake, the oldest building is 1935, a WP building, and it's over where our sign shop is in that area. It's right on the corner, you can't miss it. It's in tough shape, and it's going to need some help. Ely is 2005, in good shape, no real major problems there. We've got salt domes up. Newest thing we're going to be doing up there is fueling. We're going to be putting in gas and diesel up. Hibbing was remodeled in 1997, but the oldest building is a 1930s building, and it's been remodeled. So that's on our horizon as well as needing some future updates to it. It's going to be kind of a common theme of some of these larger buildings Public Works has are going to need something coming up. With Hibbing, we also have partners there. City of Hibbing and MnDOT are partners in that building. Virginia is the next one on that list, and 1974. It's kind of getting towards the end of its life cycle and will be on our radar screen as well. Jean Duluth, 1987. Then that's a metal building per se, and it's starting to show its life. As far as Tier 1s go, Jean Duluth and Hibbing Virginia are going to be on our radar screen, and I don't know which one's going to need attention first, but we will be looking at them to try and determine that, put plan sets together. And then Cook, and I've kind of combined this Cook because here I got it as a 2019 build, and this is the new facility and all of the stuff we're putting into it. That update will come later. Cook, the new Cook is replacing the old building, 1975, and the old Linden Grove. The oldest building is 1930. Tier 2 campuses, Tower, Meadowlands, Floodwood, Brookston, Cotton. These are kind of middle of the roads sizes, and they too are kind of at the end of their life cycle. These are more metal buildings, except for Meadowlands, which is a precast at 2007. But these are all, again, getting towards the end of the life cycle of a metal building of 30 years plus or minus. Cotton here, actually start up at Floodwood. We will be doing a fuel project where we'll be adding gas, correct, Chad?
Yep.
And Cotton is going to get gas and diesel, and that's why those are kind of in red there. Move on to our Tier 3.
The Cotton building, Mr. Chair, if I may. The Cotton building, you can throw a cat through the wall in a few spots. That's the order of some of those cheaper steel buildings that county boards invested into in the past. Their life cycle is not, and that one's, the Cotton building, I'm surprised at 89. I thought it was older than that. I mean, that building, like I said, you can throw a cat through the wall. When we did allow smoking in the offices, you couldn't light a cigarette in the foreman's office up there because it would blow it out before you, I mean, I'm dead serious, okay? So That's a building that because we didn't invest in it the way we should have, that building is up to
One thing,
Go ahead.
sorry, Commissioner. One thing to note when we're talking about these specific gas and diesel locations that we're rounding out, we're essentially rounding out the locations that we don't have that ability. And really, it's an outcome of this last windstorm where we realized, I mean, we had locations that were didn't have electricity for days, and we cannot run an operation without fuel. And, you know, looking at a big picture, we don't want to be dependent on commercial stations for that either, because in these locations we were. And so each of these locations, the other thing that we're working on across the county is electric generation abilities at these pumps, whether it's a Honda 2000 that you run out there and plug it in, or, you know, a higher end system that's connected, you know, to the main building. It's a combination of a lot of those different things, but we are making sure that we're fully capable in a power outage going forward.
Along those lines, we are doing a facility review of all of our backup generator needs. And just as an example, Pike Lake, we were down for almost a week with electricity, and we figured we were good with backup generators. Well, we had the car wash on backup generator, but we didn't have the toilets. And it was like, what? So we've had to review a lot of those things and how things got wired at the original install, and we didn't know it until the day it occurred. So we're correcting a lot of that stuff. Tier 3 small campuses, the Brimsons and the Embarrasses, 1936, even bike, WP stuff that's seen its useful life and then some. It's got to be on our horizon into the future on doing something different there. The trucks nowadays that you saw over at the tour there doesn't fit anymore in these buildings. They're parked outside, the old trucks, and even the new truck is. Capitogama Metal Building, 1979, and then the Town of White, where we actually rent some space from the Town of White as a joint facility. The gist of this facility replacement thing is we've got a salt sand dome bubble coming. We have these cone-shaped domes that were all kind of built at the same time. They're all failing at the same time. And we need to get in front of that so that we can generate the salt sands we need for winter maintenance. These are the new structures that we'll be looking for to install moving forward. And it's just a comparison. I forgot, what was the salt dome number at the very beginning? 17 salt domes or something like that? There's a bunch of them out there we've been replacing as we can, but the bubble is coming on that.
What's failing on them?
Roofs, they're a timber building, and because they're so vertical, the shingles fall off, the materials get wet.
Starts to rot.
And it starts to rot. The one in Virginia caved in under snow load.
Really?
Yeah.
They also they're not exactly conducive with the loaders running inside of them. Ventilation-wise, they're adequate, but barely adequate.
And they're not an efficient, structure or shape anymore with the new way of doing business.
The next big idea, concept that I'd like to take away from today is Public Works is going to be putting together a facility campus replacement program where we're going to sit down and go through the Hibbing, Pike Lake, Hibbing, Gene Duluth, and Virginia, look at the needs and try to prioritize those tier 1 campuses and put together a package for a larger facility replacement. Then we'll look at the tier 2s and put together what we figure is going to be needed there in an order as well, and the tier 3s that were the WP days. It's going to be a fairly expensive endeavor, and we'll get those numbers pulled together. We're gonna try and have everything within the next year or two. Plans on the shelf so that when debt service is retired, should the board choose, we'll be there with our needs going, Virginia needs help, or Hibbing needs help, and here's the plans, they're ready to go, we just need to decide it's a priority or not. Salt domes and kind of our facility CIP are the big ideas that we need to take away from today in this 20-minute, or maybe a 10-minute deal of presentation. Again, I'm kind of rushing through this stuff and had planned on saying other things. Jim, anything else you want to hit on?
Commissioner Djokovic and Commissioners, the big concept is, we're very used to dealing with a CIP when it comes to roads and bridges. I mean, very well versed at that. We want to bring that same concept to our buildings. We have inventory of all of our campuses, all of our buildings. It's in VFA, the structure inventory or building inventory is the same one that Tony and crew uses in property management. That's down to energy-related bills and all of that kind of stuff. So we can take that information now. What we really want to do is take the next step. Take that information, start developing a true, call it a 25-year, 30-year building CIP or campus CIP for all of those structures. It does a few things for us. One is it can guide us on prioritizing and looking at future replacements or upgrades. But the other thing that it can do for us is, right now, nobody has a great guide for Duluth. There's a, should we be doing a $200,000 HVAC upgrade on that because it's costing us way too much money there to heat those buildings? Should we do that, or should we, put Band-Aids on it and keep it running because we think we can leg it out for 8 more years and then it will be a replacement of that facility? So it's going to help guide just current, annual operational expenses, hopefully, and help us make wise decisions on a day-to-day basis, and also let us plan for the future. And so we are going to expend considerable effort to take the information that we've invested a lot of money in, actually getting that inventory together. We're going to use it. We're going to use it wisely. We're going to put together a plan, and ultimately we want to bring that back to the board. And it might be a year from now or so, maybe a little bit longer. But we want to put that together, come to the board, and work with the board and administration on that plan, financing, looking out into the future. How should we be managing our considerable assets in the building realm?
So, Mr. Chair, I have to ask this question. 5 years? Because, what
is your
5 years? That's when we start, our debt service starts to roll back a little bit. So you're not talking anything in the next 4 years.
That would be we want to work with John's group and administration to figure out in a no levy impact way, how can we plan going into the future for this public works building CIP?
And Mr. Chair, that was my concern on it. Look, if you look back at the Floodwood or Meadowlands garage, we had a garage down there. Frank, were you here on that one? The basement was full of water and it was right.
That was the Meadowlands project.
Meadowlands project, yeah, Meadowlands, I'm sorry. But, that facility we put there for that system of roads in that area, if you ever get a chance to get out that way, I know Commissioner Yugovich has been there, that facility in that remote site is really, it should be our prototype, what we're looking at doing from here on out. It is, it's, that building's got probably a 75-year life cycle on it, instead of investing in steel buildings that have a 20-year, 25-year life cycle. So if you get a chance to take a look at that one, if you're ever cutting across there, I think that's a really good prototype for what we should look like. That was an old WPA building that you couldn't fit trucks in, the basement was full of water. It was horrible. And we turned that into something that, quite frankly, we should all be proud of, to have it servicing those roads in that area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. So just, so can you go back to the pictures of the salt domes? Which only reminds me, so you said 75-year lifespan, right, for
Right.
this place in Meadowlands. Now, what is the lifespan of that salt dome on right?
Right here?
Nope.
Oh, here?
Yep.
This is a fabric structure. The fabric gives you 20 to 25
Can I
years.
answer that
Go
question?
ahead, Chad.
The structure, other than, excuse me, the fabric is essentially 100 years. It's concrete and treated steel. The fabric is about a 20 to 30 year product that you just replace at a fraction of the cost of the whole building.
And second part of the question, so, and then you just throw the fabric away?
Basically, yes. At the end of its useful life, there is not much of a fabric left. You can repair these tears, but when they start getting UV breakdown, there isn't much you can do.
Obviously, we throw away all the shingles too.
Yep.
Is it, the fabric, is it a petroleum product or is it something else?
Petroleum woven nylons are what, and then they're impregnated with UV inhibitors and other items.
I was going to add that Jim has been talking to me for some time about a comprehensive property management plan, so to speak. But I think some of these domes are, the ones on the left are in real tough shape, so we might be having some sooner than 4 or 5 year discussion there because we can't go without the ability to, these things are in tough shape. So we'll have a strategy for that too. And I think we have other ways to skin the cat and other options to look at so we can come to the board with a more comprehensive financing solution. That's what Commissioner Jugovich wants from us too.
Out of curiosity, what was the lifespan out of the current domes we're using? I mean, did you get
These ones
25?
here?
Did you get 20? Did you?
More than that, yeah, I mean, some of these are 35, 30.
Okay, so that's,
This is a 70s vintage
1994.
design.
was that the target? I mean, somewhere in there, so did it meet expectations?
Yeah,
Okay.
they are older. 80, they're
Yeah,
80s, 80s
What's the comparative cost of one of those old salt holes versus one of these new structures?
I'm going to default to Chad. You've done some homework on that.
The timber structures were right around 90 to 100,000 30 or 40 years ago when they were built. And the new domes, I'll use Virginia as an
It depends
example.
on the size of it. Yeah.
But that was, excuse me,
Virginia's the biggest one we have,
approaching a half a
$500,000, but it's a monster. You can load from inside and stay out of the elements. It's a big unit there. Any other questions? All right, we'll get into a quick Cook update. Cook is our closest project to being completed. Plans are done, and we're moving forward nicely. For reference, this is Highway 53, this is Highway 1, and this is Casal 115, County Road 115. This is the old disability, I guess,
Specialist.
disability specialist. I can't say it's really old, though, because they're still occupying it. But they will be moving out in May, and we will be beginning construction very soon. We've got an overall site plan for Cook now. This is the disability specialist building that we are remodeling, new parking areas around, basically encompassing the whole, I guess, 3 of the sides. Here's parking. Right through here is a causeway, and then some steps going down into the warm storage building. We have a laydown area over here, salt domes down here, and this is a cool storage building that is going to be an ad alternate. Because we initially had started with MnDOT as a partner, and because of timing and funding, they ended up backing out of that. So this warm storage space that MnDOT was taking, we think we'll be able to move our equipment from cold storage into here and maybe eliminate this, but we've got it as an ad alternate just to see what it would cost at the time to build, because cold storage is always nice to have. This site was a little bit challenging in that we discovered more wetlands than we thought we originally had. You go up there and you see a field, and once you turn a shovel, you find the hydraulic soil conditions that say it's a wetland. So we ended up going through like 17 different manipulations on this site to get everything positioned correctly to minimize wetland impacts and stuff. Project costs. There's 2 bid packages going out. One of them, bid package 1, encompasses the site work. And that will be ready to bid, it'll be advertised in March. I'll get into the bid dates in that later. Bid package 1 is site, bid package 2 is building primarily. 3 million, 22 million, total of 25. I happen to think that 25 might be a little high, but I'm not going against the design team right now. There are several things that I come into play with contingencies and stuff where I think it'll be reduced. One of the things we're going to try and experiment with is tax exempt purchasing on this. The estimate is materials, about 40% of it is materials, equaling $10 million, roughly $750,000 in savings if we can pull it off. I'd be happy to get to $500,000 because there are just some items in there that a $10,000 purchase for the paperwork that has to follow might not be worth it. But we are proceeding with, I think, a $10,000 threshold. Anything less than that, we're not going to purchase tax exempt because of the risk of audits, and the savings might not be as great as the paperwork involved. Here's the actual schedule. We're going to advertise bid package 1 March 7th, pre-bid meeting March 20th. The bid opening for bid package 1 is April 5th. McGough is the construction manager at risk. They've asked for about a month, the rest of April, to review the bids and review the bid package 2 design documents so that they can put together their guaranteed maximum price for a May 1st presentation to the board. And the guaranteed maximum price is going to be it. They're only going to do this once. We had talked about maybe 2 guaranteed maximum prices. They didn't necessarily agree with that, or McGough did not agree with it. One of the things that we're going to be potentially asking for, and when I say potentially, probably an 80-90% chance, is the suspending of the rules, because we need to get going on site work as soon as possible. If the weather allows for it, with some of the, well, not only did we find wetlands, we found a very fatty red clay that had upwards of 20%, 25% moisture in it. And that fix is the mass grading that's taking place in bid package 1 with a surcharge over the area. And in order to get that surcharge applied in an appropriate time frame, we need to start as soon as possible. The dirt work will take basically the months of June and July, and then it has to sit the month of August, so that surcharge compresses the soils, squeezes out the water. I forgot to mention another specialty item inside that site package, bid package 1. We've got vertical wick drains, which means a specialty contractor comes in and puts just like a wick that you would find in a brick building, so that when it comes down the sheeting, and then that water has a way to get outside of the brick of a exterior facade. This is kind of that same concept. You put a piece of wick down 20 feet down into the ground, You press those soils with the surcharge and the water comes up that Wick drain and drains off. We had to do that unfortunately with these fatty clays.
Brian, Mr. Chair, if I may. Brian, the suspension of the rules, you know, I would ask that you at least go back to the contractor and make them understand that we're still 2 months away from that, okay?
Yep.
When somebody asks me for a suspension of the rules, I kind of feel the same way that Commissioner Jewell felt last year. Suspension of the rules is for when it's an emergency or when it's time sensitive, but it's hard for me to make an argument that I'm gonna have to suspend the rules because of an emergency 2.5 months from now. So please make them aware. I don't know how commissioners feel about that, but I mean, that's where I'm at on it. Try and make them understand that even if they could supply us at committee of the whole the week before, even if they were to supply us with a fact sheet, it would be more palatable, I think, for commissioners to have something in that committee of the whole with knowledge that we're somehow going to have to suspend the rules, but it gives the public an opportunity to have that viewing point on it.
Fair enough. We will see what we can provide either ahead of time or adjust the schedule for a normal.
And I want to get it done on time. I want everyone to understand, I'm still keyed in on that time sensitivity.
Just piggybacking on that, it does impact those public notices that we send out.
Right.
So it's better to follow your normal procedure than have something that somebody really doesn't have any information on it, and we really should add it. So,
Very well. In order to promote construction as quick as we can, there are some long lead items, precast wall panels and bar joists. They typically take about 16 weeks to get. We are planning to order those on June 1st. So that time frame will put those deliveries in October, maybe mid-September if we luck out. The rest of bid package 2, the building, will be a July 1st bid. And bid opening is about a month later of August 1st. Then you will see all of those different bid packages come in, like did with GSC, where everything is laid out. August 1st is also, the site work is complete and the 30-day surcharge begins at that point. Hoping to begin foundations mid-September and start construction. We will build over the winter of 2018 and 2019. And hopefully, if everything goes right, that'll be our latest move-in date of October 1st of 2019. I think we can probably get a few months on that if everything goes well.
So, Commissioners, I just want to thank you for, this is the reason that we bonded for a little bit higher number so that we could have the liquidity, the cash liquidity to do the precast walls and the joists and begin. The goal here is to, rather than bid this next spring as we originally contemplated, even up to a couple months ago, which would have entailed not opening it, not getting in the building until 2020. And that would be the more normal course of action, but this is really shaped up very well. And for the upfront bonding that we did, it's, I think, going to pay huge dividends. So I'm personally excited to be in next year from next fall. So.
And Mr. Chair, for those of you who haven't seen those precast panels go up, wow. I mean, it's the shell of the building will be up. If we can get setting precast panels, we'll have the shell of that building up before the real bad weather hits. They'll be inside that building working pretty much all winter.
Chisholm guy invent the precast
I think it was.
What's that?
Didn't the Chisholm guy invent the precast panel?
Are you sure?
Just saying, just saying.
Did they invent Dodges in the center of the universe too, Mr. Chair?
No, they came naturally.
Did they? Okay.
You're gonna need this or not. I didn't talk loud enough. I've never been accused of that before.
Chair Commissioner Dubish, Commissioners, back to what Commissioner Nelson was saying about the Meadowlands building and that being a good model for those mid-sized campuses. Exactly. It's a little bit bigger than normal in that they have 2 mechanics bays and 2 mechanics working out of that location, whereas most facilities of that size don't have mechanics. But that would be our preferred model going forward for that type of structure, that size campus, that building design, build the panels again. A lot of thought went into that campus. It was the benefit of multiple buildings before it that really incorporated a lot of learning experiences, and it is a great building to model a lot of our replacements after.
Mr. Chair, at that point, we had a smart skeleton working for us. Wanted to point that out.
He's not talking about me either.
I rushed through that facility campus presentation. If anybody has any questions, please call.
So it looks like we switched up winter maintenance and
Matt came walking up.
I thought you only had one thing.
program.
Oh, no, I got winter maintenance too.
You want to do winter
But
maintenance?
that's okay. You go, man.
All right.
Yours is probably more important than my winter maintenance.
And cooler, yeah, and more interesting. So it's funny, because my section is road and bridge asset management, and sitting here, basically, if you listen to what's going on, that's what the whole day's been about, is asset management. It just, you know, for Chad, it's the fleet. He's trying to do asset management on the fleet. Brian was just talking about campuses, and Vic was talking about whatever Vic was talking about. We don't know, but it's all the same thing. Basically, the core of what we're all doing in public works is asset management. So now we'll talk about road and bridge. So here's the Public Works vision: administer a safe, well-maintained road and bridge system that meets or exceeds the public's expectations for level of service in the following areas. So that basically what we're trying to do is to stop phone calls. And that's the way, you know, you can gauge on how well we're doing by the number of phone calls that you're getting about the roads and the bridges. These are the different pieces here, the quality of the driving surface. So that's primarily what the public's thinking about. In fact, if they're driving on the road and they're thinking about the road, that's probably not a good thing, because it probably means there's something wrong with the road. You're hoping that they're just driving on it, not thinking anything about it. Load carrying capacity, so that's for both bridges and roads. And we'll get to bridges later, but we're trying to make sure that our roads have the load carrying capacity that they need to be able to keep the economic engine flowing, and we're not hampering any heavy hauls or anything like that. Number and severity of crashes, that's basically what Vic was talking about earlier, and he's been working on that, you know, for a number of years, and probably is, you know, one of the leaders in the state in that regard, and then doing the whole thing with environmental sensitivity in mind, and trying to do it all at the lowest life cycle cost. So just like all the other categories, we're all getting deeper and deeper into the really nitty-gritty of asset management, and that's to lower that life cycle cost of all of it. Since somebody else covered this, but everybody knows it anyway, so what's the takeaway here is the 1,500 basically paved miles that we're managing from a pavement management standpoint, you know, and I think that'll take you from like here to Idaho or something. I mean, it's a long ways. So you got a lot of roads, a lot of pavement you're trying to manage, and you're trying to get your best bang for your buck. Ryan's, you know, maintenance guys and Chad are handling the gravel for the most part. And then at the bottom it says St. Louis County is a total of, see, I edited that slide there to say 598 because it used to say 601. And so these are bridges that the state defines as bridges with a span of 10 feet or greater. So the question is, how come that number is never the same? If you go back in the presentations we've done, that number is always different. And it's not necessarily because we're removing structures or crossings, it's because we're changing the definition of the crossing. So just we're going to hit bridges later, but I'll go into the definition now. The state defines...
How did we lose road miles? How did we lose road miles, though?
This is probably an old slide. You know, so it doesn't affect reality.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
Very good.
digital. So the way they define a bridge is it has a span of 10 feet or greater, and that can be anything from a big 300-footer going over the St. Louis to something as small as 3 4-foot metal culverts that if they're close enough together, you measure the span all the way across all 3 culverts. So you'll get something over 10 feet. So they're drastically different. And what we would do today is if we were able to replace a structure with something that's not defined as a bridge by spacing culverts appropriately, we can eliminate a bridge in that regard. On the other hand, if we get, you know, a 4-foot culvert that's servicing a stream that's a trout stream, and you know it's probably neck down a little bit to get through that 4-foot pipe, well, the DNR standards would sometimes make us end up creating a bridge out of nowhere. So that number is always fluctuating up and down, but the key is it's usually right around 600. We never get too far off of that. So the federal definition, fun facts, the federal definition is 20 feet or greater. The state of Minnesota reduced that to 10 feet just for, you know, that added bonus of work for us to do. So what is asset management? A systematic process of monitoring, maintaining, and upgrading assets cost effectively. This is what we've been hearing about all day in different categories. The cool part, the one we're going to hit on a lot today, is the monitoring. So we're always out maintaining. We're doing the projects. You know, they're maintaining gravel roads. We're doing projects on our paved road. But the monitoring is where all of the advancements are coming lately, and it allows us to analyze the system in a lot more detail and combine that with the research that they're doing today on the different preservation methods that are coming in. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go. So this is the important slide. So you have to memorize these equations here, because we're going to break up into groups and do these calculations of PQIs later. And I'll hand out an abacus to every group. Yeah, this is just a little bit of background. So we have a language to speak in, and most of you have seen this before, but when they're evaluating the pavement surfaces, you got 2 big key things here. One is the RQI, or the Ride Quality Index, and it's basically smoothness. It's how does it ride, you know? So Kevin, driving out on the road, all he really cares about is the ride. You know, is his coffee spilling all over the place, and can he not text while he drives and things like that? So that's giving you a measurement of just the smoothness in the ride. The second one, the surface rating, that one's more of a distresses is what it's quantifying. So it's cracks, and it's different, you know, if you've got rutting or if you've got other kind of issues, potholes and whatnot. So this one's just a little bit more on the nerdy side, the sufficiency or the surface rating. And you take those 2 numbers together with this formula that you've all memorized at this point in time, and you come up with the PQI. So the Pavement Quality Index, the PQI is really all you need to take away from here, because we basically have all of our pavement sections with a known PQI. So here is basically how we turn that into something that's a little easier to understand, because everybody loves, you know, just color coding something so I can stare at it, figure it out. But so it's a scale that goes up to 4.5, although but it really never breaks 4, right?
I've seen 4 too.
Okay, so it rarely breaks 4. And if you get to 0, it's probably really not drivable, right? If you really have nothing left if you get all the way to 0. So 0 to 2.4, we call that very poor. In this PQI method, this is a MnDOT, a Minnesota thing that's used throughout the state. Poor is 2.5, 2.8. You work your way up. 2.932, we call that fair. The colors don't come out too good, but those 2 are different colors. You just can't tell. 3.3 to 3.6 is good. 3.7 to 4.5 is very good. Our KPI for the PQI is 3.1. We'd like all of the weighted average of all the pavement surfaces to be at 3.1. So that's kind of what we're targeting. So here's how we collect all of the data. So this is a cool part. I don't know if, Brian, have you seen this new van?
No.
Yeah,
I
so
haven't seen the new one.
I upgraded the slide because
see that.
the old one had an older van, and now MnDOT has a new van. And
Smart car.
yeah, I got this from their website. So basically, MnDOT performs the data collection on the county state aid highway routes every other year for us. So they'll pay every other year, including 2018, to come up and drive all of our county state aid highway routes and give us the data that we're after. And then we pay out of our own pocket for them to do all of the local roads. So every other year, we're essentially going to get a new evaluation of all of the paved surfaces. So you can see it's a pretty cool van, right? So it's got cameras. I think these are cameras. It's got sensors and cameras that are facing straight down. I think it's got laser measuring. I'm assuming this new one, the old one didn't do this, but this looks like this comes down and must ride out the back here or something.
The top ones are the pavement down cameras.
These ones?
Yep.
And then I don't know what all this is, but so they're doing this basically at speed, right? Yep, so they just cruise the whole network. We give them a driver and a navigator, and they come up and they drive the whole system and they collect all of this data for us. So this is also new, and this we don't have yet, but it's coming when we get the new data. We have kind of a simpler version of this now, but this is the new path web that we're going to be getting probably right towards the end of the year. So that van goes around and it measures all this stuff, and while it's going around, it's got GPS, so it knows exactly where it is all the time, and it's collecting this data, and it's putting it all together. And what it used to do would average chunks of pavement over about a 500-foot stretch, I think, and kind of give it an average rating through that stretch. Now it's going to do it continuously. So you can't really see too well in the slide, but as you zoom in, it gets more and more detailed. This piece here is red. Most of this is yellow. I think there's some orange. I think this is an orange chunk here. And as you zoom in, it'll give you smaller and smaller increments of the condition of the road. So you get a lot more detail. So this, you can go in and you can see where it is. In this view here, you can see the camera view here. I don't know that we're going to do this, but I just noticed when I went on here that they're actually inventorying these signs through the same system. And then over here, there's two cameras facing down. This one is literally just taking a picture with a high-speed camera. And so you can see the joints in this concrete. That is basically a black and white still image. Wherever this van is right here, pointed straight down, that's what the road looks like. And this side is the new part. That's a 3D camera. And this isn't a great example, but as it gets lighter and darker, it tells you how far away it is from the camera. So if you have rutting, the two ruts will show up darker than the high spots will show up lighter. And so you can get a gauge of what's going on there just from that 3D camera. So it gives you this visual representation. And then down here, it'll give you the cross-section of the surface of the lane that you're in. And as you move this around, you'll see this thing will update instantaneously. And then this is basically a ride matter down here. So we're going to be able, at the end of 18, we'll have updated 2018 data in this system. I think probably around November by the time they get the whole data package to us and we get moving on this software. So that, I mean, we're getting more and more data on everything, on every asset. I mean, even in the trucks and the things that you know, like you said, they're doing all that research and you don't even have to do this stuff. It's just the data's out there. And then you got to be able to analyze it. It doesn't do you any good just having this. I mean, I guess it could save you a trip out there to kind of get a feel for it. But you can take all this data and analyze it in depth and figure out some future planning, basically, and we'll get into that.
So Matt, with
Yeah.
that stuff, like is that where we'd use a road patcher or do some stuff? I mean, would this feed where we might do maintenance work?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because it kind of dovetails. So with this detailed, much more detailed data that we're getting here, it kind of ties nicely with what we're doing for pavements on projects now, where we used to, say we're going to do this project for this 5 miles, and it would usually come down to one fix. It's a mill and fill, or it's a reclaim and overlay. With this data, we'll be able to pinpoint a little bit more, like, if we just do a mill and fill for this half mile, we can actually get away with these other fixes in these other locations, and in theory, make pavement last longer, do a lot cheaper fixes, and not have to just blanket it quite as much. So it's a lot more data. These cracks here, these come up nice because this is concrete pavement. And these are those perfect little joints that they got there. But I don't even know what this thing is, but it came in real clear. So we'll have that going forward. So this, everybody's seen this except for maybe the new people, but this is the bread and butter of the pavement management part of this. This is just a graph that represents what we're trying to do. So when we go out and pave something brand new, yay, everybody celebrates. And it's up here, and it's got a great PQI, and everybody's happy. Well, if you don't do anything, this is what you can expect. So we got PQI going up on this side, we got age shooting out on this side, and so as it goes along, as it ages, it's just in straight decline until we get down to some level we can't tolerate anymore, and we go and we pave it again, and everybody celebrates, and they're excited probably till somewhere in here. And that's been the practice, going back, 10, 15 years and beyond. And now we've probably, 5, 6 years now been using this pavement management approach. And the goal is, so when you pave this, now we're following the green, which is if you manage the pavement. They both start here and overlap. You get down to here, and you're going to do some sort of preservation project to this, whether it's a chip seal or a fog seal or a crack seal or whatever it is, and you're going to get a little bump in the PQI right there. And then it's going to start that decline again. But now you're out here, so you've gained this much life. And then you're going to get down here, and you're going to do another preventive maintenance practice, whatever that is, a chip seal or something. And now you push it out even farther. So you keep doing that until at some point in time you just kind of let it go to cost. But you can see, in that same time frame where this one went way down here to about a 2.6 PQI, this one's still way up here at over a 3, So the big investment is right here when you put all that new bituminous down there and pave that. What you're trying to do is shove this line over as far as you can and keep this up as high as you can. So hopefully you don't have to get down in here. And when you do the analysis, so here's the unmanaged pavement, right, the red line. If you just repave it and let it go and pave it again, you end up with an average PQI in this analysis of 2.9, and it costs you about $75 a square yard. In the managed pavement, the average PQI is almost 3.5, and it costs 60% of the cost. So it's cheaper, and you get a lot better product in the long run. So this is the approach, this green is the approach that we're taking. That's why you're seeing so many chip seals and scrub seals, and you see some microsurfaces and different applications trying to preserve that pavement. So here's where we spend all the money. We put, however many inches of bituminous down, 5-6 inches again. And all of these actions are meant to protect that big investment. So you're trying to keep that pavement from aging, just from the UV, from the weather, from water infiltration. It'll start to get brittle. It'll crack more. You'll get potholes. The whole thing kind of goes to crap. If you do these measures in here, they'll keep that flexibility. And so as the truck's driving over it, they're not as likely to give it the cracks. And you're sealing up a lot of the cracks, and you're treating a lot of the cracks. Cracks, they're kind of like the bane of the whole existence, right? So this is what you're trying to do. You seal up the cracks and you basically, if we were talking about that table, we're basically putting a tablecloth on it for a while till that wears out. We do that a couple times. Well, pretty soon the laminate's gone, and we can replace the laminate or cover it with something else, but we still haven't gotten to the wood. We're trying to protect that chunk of wood that's in that tabletop there. So that's the goal of what we're after, is make this big investment last a lot longer. And in the process, you're keeping this PQI a lot higher, so the public's happier. So this slide is just kind of to give you an idea of all of the different treatments that can be done, the different fixes. So here again, this is in a different scale, but you're paving here, and as you age, the condition goes straight down here. And so based on the research today, what they're finding, and it's still evolving, but if you come in, and like you've seen a lot of our projects, if you do a chip seal in year 0, year 1, you're going to get the longest initial life. You're going to be pushing this arc way out here right off the bat, because you're preserving that good bit before it starts to age on the surface. As you get down here farther, you might be able to do another chip in here somewhere, push it out a little bit more. Pretty soon you might have some rutting, and then you're going to go maybe with a microsurface. You're going to do crack sealing probably in here, and you're going to have all these different options all the way down to it's shot and I have to do reconstruction. But you're trying to basically keep pushing this curve all the way out here so that you can keep it in a much higher condition. It ends up being cheaper, and you're not just running around replacing pavements all the time. So that's kind of the gist of pavement management from a pavement standpoint. We are getting into a lot of these. We've done microsurfacing. You've all seen, probably gotten phone calls asking why. So we'll go out and pave something, and then either that year or the following year we go back with a chip seal, and some people aren't happy about that. But usually I think most people like them after they're done and the rocks are off the windshield and all that stuff. So, and those things are preserving. So we've done that. We've done some microsurfacing. I think when we kind of, the ones that I know about, we did kind of a Band-Aid to carry us to a future federal project, and actually held up really well. So I think one was Maple Grove that was done. We knew the Fed project was coming in about 4 or 5 years from there, so we did a microsurface. And next year, this year we'll be coming through. Next year we're coming through to repave it, and that's held up really well, surprisingly, for just being a Band-Aid. So you got all these different fixes and all these different things you can try to do to extend the life of that pavement as long as you can. So now we get into, well, how do you analyze it? So you're going to need a software. Right now we're using Icon software. And St. Louis County applied for and received an Lrrp Opera grant to do a side-by-side pavement management software comparison between Icon and this other software called Street Saver. So Icon is a super robust program, and we, or any agency, basically you go in there and you tell it basically your degradation curves for your pavements, and if you were to do a chip seal, it's going to give you this much extra life. If I do one of these, it'll give you this much extra life. These are what all of these different fixes cost, and you put all of that in there, and you tell it how much money you think you're going to have, and it'll kind of give you a direction on, you know what, you're going to need to focus your efforts in this direction if you want to keep your PQIs high. So it'll tell you, you know, what you need to do overall. It's just a guide. Of course, you're going to have politics and many other things come into that. It's not going to create your CIP for you, but it'll give you that option to look forward that far and see how you can make the pavements last the longest with the funding that you have available. Street Saver. So we'll be buying Street Saver soon, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna take Icon and Street Saver and put the same variables in them, the same lifespans for different fixes, the same costs. Now, we know Icon is gonna give us a really good analysis of what's going on and what we can expect with this type of funding. But we know that Street Saver is a lot more user-friendly. So Icon's pretty clunky. If you're not in it all the time, you're probably not going to be any good at it. It's really an involved program, and the reporting is difficult at best, I'm told. A lot of people go back to the company to say, I'd like this report generated, and they'll do it for $100 or whatever. Street Saver has a dashboard, so it's giving you real-time information all the time. It'll give you much easier reporting. The question that we're going to be trying to answer is it going to do the analysis as good as Icon? So if it's doing what we need it to do as good as Icon, then we'll probably go to Street Saver. But because this is an LRB project, there'll be a report, and we just had a meeting with Joe Aldring, former St. Louis County guy who's now the pavement engineer for MnDOT. And he says, well, all eyes are on St. Louis County to get this done and see what's going on between these two. So we're kind of excited about that. We'll be doing that over the next few months.
Yeah, I do, but before we get too far off it, and I know you're moving ahead, if you back up a couple slides, right there. Folks, when we first saw this, the county board first saw this was 8 years ago? 8, maybe 9 years ago, something like that. And we all looked at it like, well, isn't that great? This is Jim's asking for Christmas in July. And I mean, we all did, because it kind of was a pipe dream.
Well, it looks like it's too good to be true.
Well,
It's costing me less,
Right.
and I'm keeping the road
Getting a better
condition
product.
better.
And again, we all thought it was Christmas in July for Jim, okay? But at the end of the day, folks, with the implementation of the sales tax and some of the other moves that we have made here in St. Louis County, what we're doing right now is exactly what we were shown 8 years ago. We're doing that today. And yeah, it is not this isn't an experiment anymore. This is happening. So those of you that stood up and saw the need for that, we're out there today doing this so that the data that we're going to be producing now is real-time data. Not projections, not what ifs or what could be, but real-time data. So this is, I mean, we've improved our PQI by how much?
We'll see in a little bit.
Perfect. I was kind of hoping we were getting there, okay?
So, and this is, one other point is that local road research opera grant or LRB grant, that's what's being used to buy Street Saver. Surprisingly, it's a very inexpensive software, but through this program, we're being allowed to buy it and do this experiment and run these two together and figure out, can we get a good product that's reliable, that's maybe easier to use, and then I think we're going to see, if we're successful, that many other counties will start to use this process and use the tools.
And Mr. Chair, I'm just kind of asking, please don't tell me how to build the mousetrap. Show me how the damn thing works, okay? And that was the question I was trying to get to. We're gonna get to see how the mousetrap works.
So speaking of what Jim was talking about too, with this Icon Street Saver, we're going to get, theoretically, we'll be fairly versed in how to use both of these softwares, but this whole field is constantly evolving. You know, it's just a snapshot of where it is today. 5 years from now, there'll be new products, there'll be new ways to overlap these that people have tried, or you can come in and do a chip seal and then microsurface over the chip seal, and that'll give you this much life. So it's constantly evolving, and if we, you know, all the work we've done in the past, all of the projects that we got experience from, and we can go look at and see how they're performing, our guys will be getting good at the software, and we're gonna be keeping up with all of the changes, so we'll be kind of, right near the leading edge of all of these things with the amount of program we have. So here's what Keith was waiting for. So all roads, this is all Keith wants to know, right? So all roads, 3.006, 2012, which isn't going back that far, it was 2.73. So
There we go.
that's a huge boost, of which I can take no credit for because I wasn't here when it went from there. And this is 2016 data, so we've built in 2016 and 17, and that data is not in that 3.006. So, our goal, our PQI is 3.1 that we're after. You can see the CASA route we actually got there. And it's when you put them all together that you get a little bit below there. But I think it's definitely headed in the right direction. And it's this asset management approach that's going to keep it there and hopefully.
Look at that bottom, Mr. Chair, if I may. Look at that bottom number on those unorganized townships.
Oh.
When you hear how much money we're raising out there that we shouldn't be raising, right there. Those are roads that still need to be fixed. And that tax that we're deriving from those unorganized townships is all being spent in those unorganized townships. And that's a number we need to get up.
We are really anxious to see the 2018 numbers.
Oh, I'm excited to
Confident
see it too, yeah.
what we've done.
And Mr. Chair, the first time you reported them to us, we had over 60% of our roads in load of air. Over 60% of our roads on the very first time. I believe it might even been more than that, but my memory tells me it was over 60% of the roads. So that's not just huge, that's a monstrous improvement from where it was to where it is today. Thank you for that. First time I've seen that.
So what you're going to see more of is these, we've been going back now, I'm not sure how many years we've been chipping right after paving. Brian, would you, maybe 4 or 5?
2014 was the first year we did.
4 years.
And in the last year or so, we've been going back, trying to get ones that we paved before that and get them covered. And as those start to wear out, you'll see those roads come back and get some sort of a treatment, even though they're still in good shape, because we're still trying to prolong that life of that investment for all of that bituminous.
So Jim or Matt, just can you confirm, aren't we one of the few entities that is making this concerted preventive maintenance model and, using the software to drive our decisions and doing some innovative financing to help get us jump-started with the bonding and things like that? But we're way ahead of most other counties in this regard, aren't we?
There's probably about 6 or 7 counties out there that are probably at this level that we're partnering with. Yeah.
I think there's quite a few counties that probably have embraced maybe the chip seal after you pave, but they're not going this deep into it.
And they're not sustaining it through the life cycle. I think we're on the cutting edge there. Yeah, that's we can do that.
Yep. Exactly.
And Mr. Chair, I'm going to say this, and I used to say this all the time, but I haven't said it to this group of commissioners very much, I know that. Look, 15 years ago when I came on the board, one of the first things I told Marcus Hall at that time was, quit making road decisions based on politics. Just quit. And I will tell you that Commissioner Forsman and Commissioner Rocker bought into that program back then, and we all started saying the exact same thing. We need our engineering department to give us a science-based approach to roads. And I got to tell you that what I've seen over the years, the evolution of that, we now have a science-based approach to roads. It's not being done by so-and-so's up for election next year. We need to pave some roads. And I can show you those examples out there. 3 Lakes Road, couple others in my district, where we went in and blacktopped roads that never should have been blacktopped. It's just the cold hard reality. Never should have been done. And these guys are trying to catch up with some of those today. But they were blacktopped because of political pressure. Not because the road was ready to be blacktopped, because you can put all the blacktop down you want. If you don't fix the substrate, if you don't fix the basement, what you're putting on top is just That's just window dressing. And we're not doing that anymore. We haven't done that for a lot of years. And it's something that I think this board should be very, very, very proud of today, is that when these decisions are being made, they're being made using the best available information and a science to it, so that you're not wasting money on things that shouldn't be being done. And again, it wasn't that many years ago, folks, when there were some very, very political decisions made on roads. And I'm proud to say that that's not there anymore. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, cracks. Well, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention cracks. And I don't know how many phone calls you guys get about cracks, but, you know, it's the bane of pavement, right? So why does it crack? Just to review, basically you're putting down this asphalt, and if you take a zoom way out approach to it, you've created a long, thin, narrow ribbon of blacktop in there. And expansion and contraction, when you're talking about the summer temps on the bit maybe being 120 or something, and then 30 below last week, you got a 150-degree temperature swing. It's going to crack. It has to crack. And there's nothing you're going to do to make it not crack. So, you know, we go out there, we pave something, everybody, yay, it's great. And then it cracks, and it cracked. Well, there's a lot of different types of cracks and a lot of different things. What we're hoping to do, and this is not something new, is basically you want enough cracks so that they're not real big, but not so many cracks that you got to crack every 10 feet. So if you only had one crack every 1,000 feet, it would, in the cool winter, it'd be a big crack. You know, so you're taking up all of that contraction, and there isn't really anything you can do to fix that one crack that's going to allow it to expand and close and open. So these cracks like this, you know, you'll see that many times we've gone through and crack sealed those and routed that out, and we've got a nice edge, and they put the Goomba in there, and then it can kind of expand and contract and yet keep that sealed shut. Then we'll come back, we'll chip seal the thing, because we do that in July when it's, you know, at its hottest, and then it cools off in the fall and it cracks again, and people are, well, you just chip sealed it, now it cracked again. It's going to crack again. That's just the reality of it. It's our job to keep ahead of these cracks, manage those cracks so they don't either, so you can reduce that water infiltration in there. You'll get tenting in the winter when the water freezes. You can have it so it's actually degrading the asphalt, kind of, you know, creating a triangular void in there, and then you'll see it kind of collapse down inside, and you get the thump, 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 and we got to do a crack special. But the takeaway here is you're not going to stop them. They're going to come, and they're not all bad. So they're not good for the road, but they're not the end of the world.
So, Matt, or Commissioners, just an example of tenting is if you're driving to the courthouse on the way down Central entrance, you got pretty extreme tenting. They did not use enough Goomba. Is that not right?
Now you're catching
Matt, it's taken a while for me to catch up on the terminology, but
Right.
Commissioner Jugovich, you knew all about Goomba.
I was
And
more,
crack.
I was more,
Cracks, cracking.
I was more concerned about the tenting. I thought more of a big top.
They're all bad.
I
That's all
appreciate
you-
that. You're always
all
there
of
for me.
those scenarios are bad.
Chair Commissioner Jugovich.
Yes, please.
Redirect.
There is this fallacy out there that, well, we're chip sealing these roads, so they shouldn't crack anymore. Well, no, they are still going to crack even with chip sealing. As Matt suggested, thermal cracking, that is temperature cracking, cracking due to changes in temperature. Those are going to happen no matter what material you use. And in asphalt mix design, we use called PG or performance grade binders that are polymer modified. They extend that window that prevents rutting on the hot end when temperatures are hot, but try to prevent cracking, thermal cracking when it's cold. There's a balance there. You pay, the wider that range is, the more you pay up front essentially for that performance grade binder, that oil that you put into the mix. We go by state standards. We use a certain PG binder grade that we specify when we build these pavements, knowing that that's going to give a certain performance, and that when it gets to 30 below, those pavements are going to crack. They're going to crack X feet apart. You can basically drive down a new road that's been paved within the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and you can basically see that pattern. That's the pavement essentially breaking at the pattern that we expect based on the money we spent up front. The idea of chip sealing is to hold, as Matt mentioned earlier, all of the good stuff that's in that pavement. It keeps it there, keeps it flexible.
Cool as Goomba, but it's called asphaltenes and maltenes.
Yes.
And you're trying to keep those flexible and not get brittle.
So the idea is to stop the progression of cracks, to stop the pavement wear from loading and from cracking from the bottom. And so those are the benefits of chip sealing. There's always going to be some thermal cracking, but we're trying to prevent all the additional reasons for cracking to go on. So but it is a misunderstanding out there that, you know, we need to correct.
So along the lines of Goomba, Kevin, you also are versed in the schmag.
Yeah, and Ovaltines and something like that, saltines.
Yeah. So Brian thought he was building the cook facility in a field until he dug a hole and realized it was schmag. That's what it was down there.
With a shh.
Yeah, that's an SCH, I think. So now the cool stuff that everybody's been waiting for, right? Kind of the bridge stuff. So for those of you who don't know, we're going to go through a little bit of what we do. So the asset management for bridges is totally different than it is for the roads. We don't have a cool van or a drone or anything that'll go and just give us that data. So we have to go get that by hand. So the program is the National Bridge Safety Inspection Program. It's a federal program that everybody with bridges is required to follow. It's an FHWA-led thing, but it's administered to us, the locals, by MnDOT. From FHWA's standpoint, they just look at the state, and either the state's in or out of compliance. Those are your two choices. Everybody's laughing.
No, they're working on what's behind you. You just keep going.
All right.
Okay?
The cool people will pay attention.
That's exactly right.
That's right. So we go, from federal standpoint, they just look at the state of Minnesota, and if we have one bridge out of compliance, the whole state's out of compliance. So MnDOT is constantly on top of this inspection program. So we go out with our own staff and do the bridge inspections in the field, and it's actually a fairly complicated inspection. They're federally certified inspectors. They're called team leaders. Takes 5 years and 2 classes and a proficiency test to become team leader status, and then you can go out and do these official bridge inspections. Every agency has to have a program administrator. It has to be a PE. That's been me for the last 8 or 9 years till the bridge spot is backfilled. So you got to have a PE who will look at every one of these reports and sign off on it every year that it's done. So, you know, I had to go through the 350, about roughly plus minus 350 every year. But that was how we collected all of our data. So,
Commissioner Nelson?
So, Matt, do we have to do inspections on those triple culverts that you're talking about?
if it's
That the feds
technically
call it a
considered
bridge?
a bridge, you do, yes. That's why we try to eliminate it from being technically a bridge if possible, because of the legacy costs of doing this.
Okay, now that piece is coming together for me, thank you.
Yep, so most bridges are inspected on a 1 to 2 year cycle. If we build a bridge today and it's in good shape, it'll be a 2-year cycle. If it gets down to structurally deficient status, it goes to a 12-month cycle. And there's caveats to that. If you had that culvert and it was in good shape, you can do it on a 4-year cycle, but we don't. We do it on a 2-year cycle. And I might be getting off into the weeds here, but for the inspections, the ones in the 2-year inspections, if you do that inspection in 2018 in June, and you got to do it again in 2 years, you have to do it in June of that 2-year time. If you do it in May, now you're on a May schedule. You got to do it 2 years later in May. So you can't really get ahead in the summer because you push everything ahead. And we really do them all from May 1 to October 31, basically. So it's all kind of laid out exactly how many, you got to get all of these done because they're all due in October. And we've done a pretty good job of spreading that out throughout the summer. So what we do with the 4 years is we do them on a 2-year cycle, but we don't have to worry about what month it is. We can do it any month that summer because it's ahead anyway. And the next time we do it, it's going to be ahead. So we can put those in wherever they fit in during the summer. So it just gave us more flexibility there. So the inspections that they're doing, they're called element level inspections. Those are required now by FHWA. They didn't used to be, but the state of Minnesota has been doing them for, I don't know, 15 years or more. And basically, you'll have an element for, if you were thinking of a regular steel beam bridge, you'll have an element for the beam, and you might, if it's 100 feet of beam, you might have 50 feet in condition state 1, which is perfect, and you might have 20 feet in condition state 3. It goes through 1 through 4. So you're out there assessing all of this, and then you'll have another item for the paint system on the beam. So you have to figure out how many square feet of paint are on all of these beams. And then you have to make a determination on what percentage of those square feet is in what condition state. So you end up with quite a few elements on a bridge. You got the rail and the deck, and there's elements that don't even exist, like how much cracking do you have? It's a cracking element. And even though there's no cracking necessarily on the bridge. So these reports get pretty involved. If you had a decent sized structure in okay shape, it might take you all day with 2 guys to do it. A lot of them you can probably do 3, 4 in a day. If you get into a bunch of those culverts, they have a lot less elements. You can probably do 5, 6 in a day. So we have one guy, and usually either a new employee or a temp, who basically spends his whole year doing this, probably 2,500 hours a year or more from that one guy on just doing this. So he's pretty busy with that. And this is basically where we get all our data. So all of these reports, all of these details, all of these pictures, all of these files are stored in this SIM system. So Structure Information Management System. It was created by MnDOT and given to all the locals. So the state actually is housing all of our bridge data, which is nice for us because we can access it, we can query it, we can take the data, export it, and run analysis on it. And we don't have to have the official data and then our own database that are continually out of sync. So that's a lot nicer than it used to be. You used to have to do a request to get this information from the state, and now we can just do it ourselves. So then there's actually quite a few, and I won't go into all the details, but because it's a federal program, the state and the feds come and they do an audit about every 4 or 5 years, and they'll look at our paper files and our digital files, and we'll go to 2 or 3 bridges, and they'll do an inspection and compare it against our last inspection to see if they think that we're doing it right. So we'll go through that whole rigmarole, and then they'll, basically nick us or not. And we've been doing pretty good in that, but there's a lot of pieces to that just kind of fly under the radar that most people don't really care about. So the SIMS is a database. Like I said, we can get all of our stuff out of there, and we don't have our own database. So basically all of those condition states and all of those codes are in there. We can search for bridge type, bridge length, bridge width, what kind of road it's on. It's all in there. So that's where we get most of our data. Wanted to touch on load ratings. So we'll see later where we are with load ratings now, but back in maybe 2010 to 2012 in there somewhere, the contractors started rolling out what the state calls special hauling vehicles, and you guys have probably seen them all now. They're pretty much everywhere. It's like a big tandem, except it's got 6, 7 axles underneath there, and most of them come up and out of the way when it's not fully loaded, and then if they load it up, they can haul quite a bit. and they just stay under the state statute of 9 tons per axle or whatever it is. So they're legal trucks, but none of the bridges were load rated for that truck because it's a lot of weight in a really short truck. In the past, to get that much weight, you had to have a tractor trailer. It was a totally different axle spacing. But it was a legal truck. So the state came in and they said this is going to be a problem. So they started doing these SHV load rating contracts for the locals. I think they're on their 6th one. And we've probably had half our system rated by the state in the last 5 or 6 years just from that. And what they're doing is they're having all the consultants model them in this new modeling software from Ashto called Vertus. And they're keeping the models. And our consultant has the model. So once you have the model and somebody says, here's what I want to haul across your bridge, it takes like 5 minutes for either the consultant or MnDOT to tell you if you can do it or not. Because once it's been modeled, it's super easy, they said, to just run any kind of truck to tell you if it's safe or not. So that's kind of a prelude to something I thought Vic might talk about, but it was the unified permitting process that the state's looking into. You know, if there was a guy who was hauling a heavy haul from the cities up to International Falls, he's got to get permits and talk to every agency between here and there to get all those different permits. The state's slowly looking at, and I think we're going to be piloting this soon, a unified permitting process where a hauler would go to MnDOT and be able to look at all of our system and every agency's system in that route and issue the permit, or get a hold of us, tell us we ran the bridges, this is what they're proposing, and I think there's a day or so where we get to deny it, but it all goes through one person or one office, and then the trucker gets his permit or doesn't. So that's something that's coming on the future. You probably see it in one of these in next year or something. So the Vertus software, that's what it's all being modeled in today. It's been nice for us, actually. The LHB has done most of the contracts with the state for St. Louis County bridges. And so if we get a request for a heavy haul, we just call LHB. If they've modeled it, 5 minutes, they don't bill us. They just run the number and tell us yes or no. Brim for Locals is another initiative that it just got done, but Brim is a MnDOT. It's basically a super fancy Excel spreadsheet that they use for managing bridge decks, which is basically primarily what MnDOT does for their bridge program now, is just decks. And we got some state aid money. It paid for a consultant and this guy named David Hedin, who's like a human supercomputer, to sit down and recalculate the whole thing so that it fit for locals. And they're going to be rolling this out where we'll be able to open this spreadsheet through the web, and it'll pull all the data automatically from the SIMS database, so we don't ever have to update this data. And we can manipulate how we want it to score it from a risk-based. Do we want to put a heavy load on ADT or this, or what, you know, it's CASAR route, we want it to go higher. We can change all those parameters and it'll give us a list. And that's just like another tool in the toolbox that we can look at to say, you know, I didn't realize that I had all these metal culverts that were going to be a problem, but they really showed up on this list. So that's one of the asset management tools we're using. We got the in-house data analysis, so we don't yet have, and I don't know that I think they're piloting something in Hennepin County for, you know, Icon or Street Saver, but on the bridge side, but we don't have anything at this point. And that's fine because we've been mostly playing catch-up mode on stuff you'll see in just a minute. So when we're figuring out the bridge program, what we're looking at, condition, obviously it's a risk-based analysis where we don't want to leave anything out there that's makes us nervous, basically. The things that are, there's a lot of old structures that are concrete, maybe WP era stuff, but they're not going anywhere. And you'll have something built in the 70s or the 80s that was built out of timber, and you wouldn't be so confident to say that it's not going anywhere. So especially even if it's been load rated, not everybody listens to the signs. So we basically try to take the ones that we think are the highest risk, put them in. We also prioritize, these came out really faded, CASA routes, so we basically were okay with the bridge being load posted if it's not a hindrance to, you know, economic or the only route to get somewhere. Well, CASA routes, we don't want them load posted below legal loads at all. So we're always trying to stay ahead of that so that we're not inhibiting logging or other trucking or whatever it is. So we, you know, kind of put CASA routes on a little bit different analysis, trying to get at them before their problem. We're trying, there's a lot like, you know, in this economic development category, we have Polymet going up there, so we're looking at some of those bridges up in that neck of the woods, and do we need to repair them or replace any of them? So those play a factor, and a lot of it in the end, you may have this list of here's the bridges we're going to do, here's 50 bridges, but my funding types are, you know, if I got, which we'll get into a little bit later, if I got town bridge funds that I have to spend, well, that only so many bridges qualify for town bridge funds. So that's going to play a big role in it too. So here's the update on the bridge condition. What we noticed back, and we did an analysis, I think it might have been 12, maybe a hair before. And the state was pushing it too, that there was a whole lot of timber substructure bridges. So most of you have probably seen them. They're usually really small, steel beam, but it's basically a treated tree jammed in the ground to act as a foundation for the whole thing. And they were coming up as kind of a bubble. So when we did the analysis in 12, we said we had 143, which is almost 25% of the system, we had timber substructures on. And so we really started hitting those hard in the subsequent years, and now that number is down to 55. So we're pretty excited about that. Functionally obsolete, wait a minute, I'm down here, 73, sorry. Structurally deficient at the top, question.
It's not it's a statement and a question. Mr. Chair, if I may. First of all, why do I still have one fracture critical bridge out there?
I was saving it for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please don't save it for me. This is unbelievable what we've done on
They're
bridges.
pretty amazing numbers.
This is not, it's just flat unbelievable what we've done on bridges in 5 years. The 2012 flood woke us up on a lot of things and really got us out there going after every bridge and every, you know, and a lot of these are, all of South St. Louis County was checked by firms that we had done, but to go from 143 to 55 in 5 years.
On the deficient, yep.
I understand, just in structurally deficient alone, that's just unbelievable.
And that's mostly because about everything we do is deficient.
Right.
And so just for those who haven't heard that term, it came up a lot right after the Minneapolis bridge collapse. Right? Structurally deficient, it sounds really scary. It's not that scary. It just means it's getting to the poor stage, but they're still safe if they're load rated.
Where did you save me the fracture critical bridge?
It's actually not in your district. It's up by 22. There's the last fracture critical bridge is a big high truss, which was one of the coolest ones. That we had one on 7 not long ago, and we
okay,
removed it.
the steel structure
The
bridge.
steel structure, and it's on a road with like, you know, ADT of like 5, and it's actually in okay shape. So we're kind of saving that one for when we have no other good candidates for federal money, because it'll go right to the top of the list. So see, it's kind of the ace in the hole.
I understand.
But just to clarify though, because this terminology is from a bridge engineer standpoint, structurally deficient means one thing.
Yep.
It's the two real, to me, the critical number here is how many load posted bridges do we have?
We're cutting all these in half.
And how many, yeah, and then you look at functionally obsolete, cut that in half.
Yeah.
Because the functional side, the ability to bring loads across is important. Fracture critical does not mean unsafe. It means it doesn't have a redundant system to check it. And unfortunately, a fracture critical example, and there are thousands across the United States, thousands, was rather the I-35 bridge. That was fracture critical. I believe the Blotnick Bridge is a fracture critical structure. So it was a design that did not have a redundant safety feature, and we won't be building those anymore. But it's unfortunately been, when you see fracture critical or deficient or obsolete, those are all technical terms that have a lot different explanation to the average person. But fracture critical does not equate to unsafe. That said, we made targeted studies very quickly and addressed the bridges that needed to be addressed.
Isn't Blotnick a Chisholm guy? Commissioner Nelson?
Rodnick is a Chisholm guy, yes. All of these numbers are truly impressive, and I have to tell you that fracture critical still hits me right in the wheelhouse, because I drove across that I-35 bridge 15 minutes before it went down. And you don't ever forget what fracture critical is. And I didn't even think about that one steel bridge that we still had, because I was pointing at the bridge out in front of Public Works here as one of the, I thought we saved the gem. We took a lot of criticism, unwarranted I might add, for saving that, because it's part of history. And who else was gonna save it but us? But fracture critical, I drove across one of those for basically the first 40 years of my life, that was one of the last steel bridges across the St. Louis River that led to my home. And you knew when you went across it, because you heard thump, 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 as the plank on the bridge rumbled as you came across. But that improvement since 2012 is nothing shy of remarkable. I know we're making progress every year. Every commissioner here knows the price of some of these bridges, $300,000, $500,000, $700,000. What an investment, and how much we've chipped away at it. Thank you.
Kevin, you,
Sure, Commissioner Jugovich, the one that really stands out for me is the timber substructures. We came to the board in 2011 and warned the board that we have a major issue. Matt had put together that presentation back then, kind of showed this big bubble and what was coming at us, and I mean, man, half of them, are kicked out, and in large part to transportation sales tax. We put a lot of those dollars in the bonding towards bridges, obviously. I mean, that really has been a big part of this. We've been very lucky to get bridge bonding through the state. We've been very lucky to get bridge off system federal dollars. We've been a big player in going after those. Basically every year we get one or two of those out of that program as well, and every little bit helps, and yeah, it really shows in these numbers.
Are we, Mr. Chair, if I may, Kevin, are we doing something through, I know Dana's been here all day, are we doing something in terms of a press release that the board went through this piece and giving our public works departments a chance to highlight some of these things? Because I have to tell you, the average person out there does not know we've done this, and I'd like them to.
Commissioners, we have been trying to highlight the construction program. Engineers are by very definition not public relations seekers. So it's always like extracting a molar or something like that to get them to tell good news. But we'll be working on more of that. I think we can tell this story as we, and it's something that commissioners today, I mean, this is one of the things that I know Commissioner Nelson wanted to achieve, that we would come away with a few takeaways, each of us. Now, we probably have our own, what strikes our own nerves.
that
and,
formula, that's what you're.
SMEG and
Yeah.
QI times RQ over the algorithm X. But this is really something. When you look at our 598 bridges.
Yep, nailed it.
So this is the type of progress, but I think we've had lots of tidbits. And you look at, I'm really impressed with how much the state is looking at us on the Local Road Research Board, the LRRB. The fact that we're a significant contributor to that, and this project on the software that helps us manage this. I mean, we use MnDOT software primarily for the bridge inventory and monitoring, but also the efforts of our partners to help us with this in the inspection side. because Matt and his team can't do it all. And it's just been really impressive what our own staff can do, and how much of our efforts are done by our own staff is incredible.
Sure. So I don't want a long answer to this one. But I assume that the fracture critical bridge that we have one of, which has 5 people a day crossing it, is an extraordinarily low risk for anybody ever getting hurt. Because the critical part is that it doesn't have this redundancy. But the likelihood that it's going to fall down is remote. It's not got thousands of people.
Right, and
You are an engineer, I know.
they're all load rated, so if it, which you know has multiple factors of safety, and if it can't hold legal loads, it would be signed. And if you know, these are signed for usually still a near full capacity truck, and you just can't take quite the full load. So somebody driving their car across here, it's like a leaf, you know, on these bridges. So this one just happens to be in really good shape. It's not scary at all yet. So.
Commissioner Joe said it well, but another way of saying is if we're unsafe, we'd close the bridge. Period.
And we
do not
that at
take-
Wausau.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Onward.
And so, yeah, that's probably a good message, though. I mean, you'll see a lot of signs, or we could have a bridge that was, you know, you would just look at it, not being an engineer, and say, this is scary. And if it's been load rated, and you stay within that load rating, it's safe. That's the takeaway message. So people see them and they're, oh, it's posted down to 15 tons. Well, your car weighs like 3 tons. So you're not even anywhere near it. So as long as we stay up with the load ratings, we're fine from a liability standpoint. Kevin mentioned the load posted bridges. So if you go back actually a few years before that 88 number, it was 50. And it was the SHV changes to the load rating that it was just like when the timber haulers bill went through. We went from, you know, a few, I don't know, 20, 30 posted bridges, and all of a sudden we had a zillion posted bridges, and then we replaced, and then they changed the rules again with the SHV, so that number went up, and now it's going back down, and they'll probably do it again someday in the future. So we're going to hit on this, the ped bike trail stuff. I know we had a meeting down at the courthouse, and we just talked about this, and this was one of the things that maybe most people didn't know that we do in public works that pertains to this. It's kind of going on in the background. So things that we do just in normal operation business and projects, if we've got the width, say on a road that we're going to go through 23 out to, from Orr to Crane Lake is a good example. We had the structural width of the road to pave the shoulders wider. We had gravel shoulders, we have the base there already, so we paved the shoulders wider so that you could get more pedestrian and bike people, facilities and amenities used in those stretches. So we do that wherever we can. If the width is already there, we're not gonna, you know, you change the whole scope of the project if you have to widen the roadbed. We take input from public ped and bike organizations, the BPAC, you know, we saw what we did on 4th Street. We get a lot of those urban jobs, and we definitely put some emphasis on the ped and bike, but you know, it's going up against a lot of different factors of parking and how many lanes and capacity we need, and so the physical space. You know, if we're not going, a lot of times in Duluth, if we're not doing a full rebuild, we're not going to move that curb. It's going to be rebuilding that road from existing curb to existing curb, and if you can't fit anything new in there, then that's usually going to be the limiting factor. We act as the fiscal agent for Mesabi Trail projects. Most of those, maybe all of those, have been federal, and we were the fiscal agent on all the St. Louis County ones. We do annual...
Just a quick update on that one, if I can. Mesabi Trail Regional Rail Authority applying for the last roughly $5 to $6 million that will complete the trail from Grand Rapids to Ely, Minnesota. So we're literally, for our bike enthusiasts, bike hike enthusiasts out there, we're literally 4 years away from a project that that started 20 plus years ago to get from Grand Rapids to Ely And thank you, St. Louis County Public Works, for the help on the Highway 169 turnback. Without your help, we would have been mired down in the, what did you call it? Quagmire or whatever it is, whatever it
Yeah,
is,
schmag.
okay?
Yep.
That's
But
got-
but certainly that, it says act as a fiscal agent, but what they should say is help out in a whole lot of places to accomplish that trail. Without our Public Works' assistance, that trail wouldn't be all the way through, and I promised Commissioner Forsman that it would get done.
We offer annual permits for snowmobile trails, ATV trails that in certain stretches have to parallel the road and use the St. Louis County right-of-way to get to the next segment. A lot of times that's also using our bridge shoulders because they don't have their own bridges across the rivers. So we typically do that every year. We had the project that was mentioned earlier today, the Rice Lake Super Sidewalk. So, you know, that was a whole added project that we did just because we could see the need there. Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes to Transits are two funding programs that Vic usually does, but those are typically sidewalk and pedestrian facilities that are getting added near and around schools or transit pickup. So we're doing quite a bit of stuff in the background, just in the normal day-to-day business that probably doesn't show up too much, but just wanted to make everybody aware.
One additional thing is that we have done, besides the Masaba Trail, we've done many other federal trail projects for cities under 5,000, townships, etc.
So just a quick look at the budget. Jim mentioned right now we've programmed 48 million. We've got about 51 million. And as things the bids start to come in and we can kind of hone in on that number, we'll see what else we're going to let out the door. But this is typically, you know, besides the last two on the bottom, this is kind of what we expect annually that we can kind of work with. State aid regular construction, we usually get about 15.4 with the new formula. We carried a little over from 17. Then the state aid municipal construction, so that's cities under 5,000 with state aid routes. That number went up at the detriment to the top number, correct? So we've got some that we carried over, and that'll be going away in 2019. So we didn't really see that bump coming. Town Bridge is an account that they skim a little off the top of state aid, and they have a formula based on how many township deficient bridges you have. And probably the last 4 or 5 years, we've gotten somewhere between 700 and 750,000, 775 this year. And if you have over 700,000 at the end of the year, they won't give you next year's money. So we pretty much have to program a township bridge every year until that formula starts to come out with a different number. So, and that's in big part because of the UT swap that was done back in 2010, where we turned a lot of county roads into unorganized township roads, and it put a lot more bridges in that deficient town bridge list. So that's like I had mentioned before in the bridge programming, we got to look at funding sources like that we have to spend. That'll tell us, well, let's pick the next highest one that qualifies for that and do that one next. We get the local levy, 5.8 million. GRIP, 547,000 gravel road investment program. TST pay as you go, roughly we say about 8 million. We carried over quite a bit from last year because we have 44 and some other projects that are bigger projects that we knew we were going to fund with TST dollars. So we've got quite a bit this year, but normally it'll be about 8 million that we're programming for. And then I threw these last two in because they're not typical. This year we have secured $2.2 million in federal funds. One of them was $1 million in FLAP funds, which is Federal Land Access Program. So it's something we apply for. We got $1 million for that. And the rest of it is a bunch of projects that Vic's doing, mostly HSIP or Safe Routes to School, striping and edge line and different things that he gets money for. So those funds are the ones that we have to proactively chase. They're not guaranteed, they're project specific. And then the last one, bridge bonding, those were actually the last floor scrapings of the last bridge bonding bill that the state did, and we had a project, and we were able to scoop up the change that was left over from the state.
Commissioner Nelson, question?
TSD carryover, please, what we're talking about there is, we wanted to make sure we had the money in hand before we went ahead with the project, and now we have a big project in front of us, so we're anticipating 8 million. Because carryover on TST, I'm pretty sure wouldn't be all that popular. It's not popular with me, I can tell you that, but we get that. That really is, the reality is that as we bring that money in, we don't know what it is until basically when we get to the end of the year. That's when we know what we've got, correct? The second thing, and answer both at the same time if you want, or however. How much additional revenues are we picking up based on the transition to UT status roads annually?
Chair, Commissioner Jugovich, Commissioner Nelson, the 7.5 million, if you recall, in 2017, we had bonding to spend. And so what originally, we were planning on spending bonding in 2017 and 2018. And then using pay-as-you-go also in 2017. What we decided to do was just get rid of the bonding. And so we went 100, instead of using bonding in 2 years, we said we're gonna use all of the bonding in 2017, and we're gonna carry over more pay-as-you-go into 2018 instead of the bonding.
It isn't the fact that we're carrying it over, it's just what we're calling it. The only objection I have, okay?
Well, when I say carry over, those are unexpended.
Right.
Pay-as-you-go 2017, or funds accrued or earned in 2017 that did not get expended on projects because we used the bonding money instead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was going to say, is that because when you go out on these bonding, there's a time frame within which you have to have that money expended. And even though our group's very good, they have a lot of projects ready, the capacity of the construction community has only been so much, and there's only so much you can get done in a year. So in order to continue to get those bond dollars expended with survey, time frame that's required, there might not be bigger chunks on the bonding last week.
And here's the other interesting thing on that. The 7.5 million there that we brought over into 2018 actually wasn't earned until, it's actually, some of it's still coming in.
Yeah.
Correct,
And so,
that was my point.
And I wanted to make sure I hit that. That those were money, I mean, literally within the past 2 weeks, some of those last dollars have actually come in as a payment from the state after the taxes have been collected. And so the interesting part is, you know, in the middle of the construction season, we're actually cash, if we're spending that whole 8 million in that year, the county's actually cash flowing for probably about 5 months.
Right.
Those payments.
I don't object to anything other than just cross off carryover from 2017, because most of those dollars we don't have in hand. And I don't want to leave the impression to people that somehow I had this money in hand and I just chose not to spend it.
It's our internal.
Get rid of the word carryover.
Get rid of the word carryover,
From 2017.
and I'm cool, okay?
To your question on unorganized township, yeah, I mean, of the town bridge funds that you see there, due to that switch of adding 300 miles of unorganized township road to the township road system in St. Louis County, and what basically brings in the dollars from the statewide formula, which is basically just based on mileage. I mean, that's it. That, you know, probably half of that, you know, maybe 350,000 was an increase due to that switch. So I'd say at 350,000 there, another 130,000 in town road aid.
Okay, is that
increase.
annually?
Annually.
So it's about $500,000 or very near.
Yeah, right in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we hear that all those road signs we put up that we didn't change anything, we're bringing in an extra $500,000 annually because we took that step.
That's direct aid from the state.
Correct.
That's not including the town levy issue.
Correct.
Yeah.
Does not include the town levy. This is dollars that are coming from outside
Yes.
sources to St. Louis County as a result of that move. $500,000 annually. That's the only point I wanted to make on that one.
Part of this 775 is because of the deficient town bridges that came from that swap, and I'm not sure what percentage of that.
It's
So
about
that's,
300,000, it's about half of that.
that's where you,
Half.
okay,
Yep.
that's where you came from. All right. So, and then, so, we just wanted to throw this note out here,
Yeah.
right here. So in right now, in the current CIP from 2018 to 2022, there's about $21 million in federal funds that are shown in there. That number will probably go up, if I had to guess. But right now, that's all funding that basically we either had to pursue, we had to apply for with project-specific applications, or we had to for surely make sure that we had projects that would fit into the scopes of those funding, so that they were available, knowing that these programs were coming. We don't want to go ahead and do this with our CASA dollars and then think, oh, we should have applied for this flat fund with that, on that project, and now it's too late. So these are the things we're constantly doing when we look at the CIP is where can we get these federal dollars or state dollars, state bridge bonding is another good one, so that we can supplement this. And there's actually quite a bit of money coming in from that regard. Just a note on bridge bonding, actually it's on the next slide, but that one has a unique application because you have to, in order to apply, you have to have a completed plan, signed, done, and everything. So the funding won't, right now they just started the session, right? So maybe sometime between now and May they'll get bonding, and then maybe it'll be available to the agencies in June. Well, that's too late to build anything, so we actually have to do a certain amount of plans well in advance, and we would put our 19 bridge projects into that funding hopper today, hoping bonding came, and if it doesn't, we'll build them with what we programmed, and if it does, it'll allow us to take another project from another year, pull it ahead, and we get to build more bridges. So we've taken advantage of that quite a bit in the last several years, although the last few have been pretty bleak. Yeah. So the Lrrp, Local Road Improvement Program, we applied, I think, 3-4 projects for that, and we got a grand total of $0 out of that program this year, although we've had projects in the past from that, I believe, right? Yep.
The green tea was built with Lrrp dollars.
Yes. None of our projects were quite cool enough this year, I think, to get any funds. Like I said before, the 5-mile stretch of the 44 job up through Brimson there, we got $1 million from FLAP, Federal Land Access Program. We have 2 Federal Bridge off-system projects coming, one in 19 and one in 2022. Safe routes to school, Vic's got some of those that he does. Safe routes to transit, I think we have one this year on Boundary that's a safe routes to transit, if I remember right. HSIP money, Vic is always proactively chasing down the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's a 90-10 split, so he gets 90% of the project costs, and he does striping, and he's done rumble strips, and all kinds of different safety improvements with that fund. He's kind of, like a kid in a candy store, because a lot of other small counties won't go for this, because it's federal, and it's a big pain in the neck, and it's safety, and their people don't really care about rumble strips and whatever. So a lot of times, there's a lot of money there for Vic to grab. This MnDOT Cooperative Agreement, that one's new. Basically, if you have a project that's an intersection between a county road and a MnDOT trunk highway, it may be a high priority intersection for us and a super low priority for MnDOT. Well, we can now apply to MnDOT. I think the number is maybe $650,000 a year that District 1 will have. And we can apply and say, we'll pay for our half, and you can get that money additional to D1 and pay for your half. So it allows the locals to do projects with MnDOT that are not necessarily high on MnDOT's list, but they're high on the county's list.
We have 4 projects coming up using that process.
This is the first go-round, right? So the 2019
We essentially
project.
consumed all of the funds for
Yeah.
District 1
Nobody else wanted
because
them.
nobody else wanted them. So we,
So it was like 650,000 if I remember right. Yep.
Why we have you?
Coastal grants, we've done some of those. I think they were 50-50 match at like 30 grand. We used them to hire a consultant to get a bunch of data for the culvert inventory, if I'm remembering that right. Yep. So I think we did 3 of those or 2 of those? 4 of those. So, you know, that's another one where we're proactively going for it. Transportation alternatives, we just got awarded one of those for a wayside rest by the French River for 2022, I believe. But those are another one where you have to kind of have something that fits into the program. You got to be ready to apply when the solicitation comes out. And then this federal, I can't remember if it's reallocation or redistribution.
redistribution.
I was close. So we do a lot of favors for other counties. If we have a federal project in 2018 or 2019, we may have it 50-50 federal and state aid, even though you can pay for 80% of it with federal money. And some other little county will have a $500,000 federal job, and we can take that $500,000 federal money and give them state aid in return, and our project really doesn't change, and theirs becomes a state aid project. So we do those favors, and then when this federal redistribution comes around in like August, that's when the sun shines back on us, I think, and because we were able to do those favors and have that flexibility, have that planned in, a lot of that redistribution comes back to us. So we'll get more federal money that way.
So for instance, the last few years, we've gotten on the order of $350,000 to $600,000 in federal funds to apply to these projects that we've been underfunding purposely. This is what I was speaking about at the Hermantown board meeting.
Right.
So out of nowhere, here comes another $500,000 in federal funds that now on that project that we're planning on either spending TST or our state aid allotment, that $15.5 million a year. Now we can apply that to another project that we want to do.
And it didn't change anything from our federal project category. It was exactly the same. So we're constantly, looking at all these. Our CIP is always knows that these things are in the background there, and we shouldn't step on our own toes by not having projects ready. Same thing for the bridge department. We've got the BROS funding. There's 598 bridges, and then they'll send you a list. These ones meet the qualifications, and it's like 6. So, you really have to kind of keep an eye on that in the system and say, I'm going to save these bridges because they'll qualify for that BROS funding when the next solicitation comes out. So that's all I have, an hour and a half later.
Funding does, the colors of money mean a lot to how we do our business. We're always trying to maximize every funding source coming in. And the tricky part is looking at eligibility and making sure that you can have something that matches that color of money.
Okay, Mr. Chair. One last question. How many years ago did we redesignate unorganized township roads?
It was 2010, I think, wasn't it? UTC?
Redesignation of the unorganized townships?
Yeah.
So 8 years we've brought in, has that $500,000 been the same all the way through? So we brought in over over $4 million to unorganized townships by making that move. Right? Thank you.
So,
That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. The question is, we've got a 45-minute presentation from Land Survey, and he had,
There's 2 that were 20 minutes, can be done in 10 minutes apiece, so
I got a meeting in the range at 5 bells.
we can do our best to be at half hour.
Yeah,
There you go. I did survey the.
there's another option where we could do the surveyor presentation at another board workshop to give, because I don't
We could do the
These guys-
surveyor presentation we've held them here all day, but for the Chair of Public Works, we could also do the surveyor presentation at Committee of the Whole as a time specific too.
These guys have put a ton of work into it.
I know that, and I don't wanna miss it.
Shortchange
No,
them.
no, no. By
Not a
all
chance, not a chance I'm gonna shortchange them.
I'd love to go now.
means. Go, go, go.
He's the
You're
chair.
on the clock.
No, let's do it.
He's the
You're on the
chair.
clock.
Go.
He's the chair.
He's the chair.
Let's start.
Coming up to Auburn next.
I'm giving you options.
I don't need to go that way.
I'm not telling you what to do.
So while they're passing out the materials, I just want to say another milestone is, once again, after all the funding sources and carryovers, and grabbing every dollar we can for the construction program, over almost $52 million, another $50+ million construction season for St. Louis County. I think that's 6 years in a row.
So while these guys are setting up, we have Nick Stewart, who's our county surveyor, right there. Yep. We got Preston Dowell, assistant county surveyor, or deputy county surveyor, sorry. And Todd Hendershot, deputy county surveyor as well. So welcome, guys, thank you.
All right, well, you took my first line there. I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna do this.
That was just in case you didn't know their names. We covered for you.
And behind the podium's fine too, you don't have to walk around.
All right, well, you know the three of us on the county surveyor. We have Preston and Todd, deputy county surveyors. Preston is in charge of the drainage office. Todd is down here in our Pike Lake office. We actually have 2 offices to cover the whole county. So for today's outline, we'll be covering the history of the Plss system, the public land survey system in St. Louis County, the county surveyor's responsibilities, and the business plan established in 2010. So right off the get-go, we're going to switch, and Preston is going to take over with the history of the Plss system.
All right. All right, how many people thought they were going to get a history lesson today? Anyone? All right. I think it's really important to start off with this because it's something that really, as the United States, we go back to the Revolutionary War when it comes to land surveying. And to understand what surveyors do, especially county surveyors, we need to go back to what people were doing at that time. Back, 1776, we had a couple things. We had our freedom from Great Britain, we had a lot of debt, and we had land. That's basically, from my perspective, the start of the American dream, right? We got debt and we got land. That's what we have. So what do we have to do to get rid of that debt? Well, we can start taxing people, but I think that's one of the reasons why we went to war with Great Britain in the first place. So we had to figure out a way to pay all these debts. So what happened is they came up with a plan to inventory all the land that they had and survey it. And what they were going to do is they were going to create this system, which was a new system, hadn't been devised before, and they were going to break the entire country, and they were going to into a 6 mile by 6 mile grid. And then from there, they were going to break that into 1 mile by 1 mile sections. And next, they would subdivide those sections down so that they could be sold to local landowners. And as you can see here, this is a copy of a GLO plat. What would happen is the surveyors would take their notes, give it to the general land office. They would create a plat, and that plat would be in the office at the general land office, and the landowners would come in and they would say, I want to buy this piece of property. The expectation was then for them to take that map, those notes, that information, and go out and find their property on the ground and occupy it. And that's what they essentially did. So what tools were the surveyors using? Today we think we have GPS, we have total stations, we have all these fancy tools, but what were these guys using?
Well, they were basically using what we call a staff compass and a chain. Those were the two main tools for measuring. And then they were using axes and scribes. So what they would do is they would take those compass and chains and march across the land and put posts in the ground like this. This is what they did. And in St. Louis County, what do we have? We have wood, we have timber. They would actually cut down this tree, place it in the ground, and I can pass this around. And you can see this one we found about 2 years ago. You can see the scribing in that. That's the actual post. They would also take and they would scribe into a tree what section it was in. And that's the information. I can pass these around. Just please be careful, they are very rare. That's the information that the landowners would use to find their corners on the ground and then use and occupy their land. So one of the things we as surveyors, I brought props because I knew by the time we got to it, you guys were going to be not terribly excited to listen to one more person go on and on and on. So this is where this concept that surveyors don't move corners. We find corners, we maintain them because those landowners were expected to go out and find those specific corners. And what we would do, or what they did, is they gave us instructions that we are required to follow in the Manual of Survey Instructions. It's all codified here in US law and in state law. So, go through here.
So just a question, how old is that? What do you think?
That one's probably, I'm guessing around 8 years old.
No. What?
When we found
it get put in?
That one was probably placed in the 20s or 30s. We think that one's a subsequent perpetuation. That one probably is not original. That one there that you see right there, you can see the tag on it. They found it, I think, in 1960. That was probably placed 120, 130 years ago.
This is tamarack or black spruce.
Yeah.
You can see by the...
That was found down right down the Comstock area here relatively recently. Again, they're very rare to find these things these days. You know, what do we have? We have timber and mining. What happens with timber? It gets logged. What happens with mines? They mine out the land and these things start to disappear.
Can you repeat that last line of that slide again? Because that is a very important point.
It's actually, it leads me into this slide, which is exactly that. What happens with this system, and this is a wonderful system, us surveyors, as you can tell, we're very passionate about what we do. The intention was that the local landowners and the local municipalities were going to maintain this system. Unfortunately, it was such a huge system, they didn't really make provisions for that. So instead of maintaining the system, it fell into disrepair almost immediately. Like I say, we have timber, we have minerals, we have construction. What happens to all those things with all those things? Trees get cut down, ground gets tilled up, with landowners if they're farming or if they're building roads and doing all kinds of construction, and if we have mines, who knows where everything went. I mean, I got one more prop here. Here's kind of our standard steel tube that we put in today. We found this fall in the middle of the woods somewhere. If we can do that to a steel tube like this, what do you think they're going to do to one of these trees or one of these posts? They're not going to last very long. The system actually fell into disrepair really quickly. But they're still out there. Here's a picture of one of our new technicians. I heard someone say, you know, it looks like you kill a vampire with one of these. We actually found this one on Halloween this year, a post that we found. We can track that one back to about 1910. Here's another one. It's hard to see. This is another original bearing tree. It's a really interesting case because the tree fell face down and the water, it froze underneath the water. And what happened was when we cut through it with the chainsaw and pulled it out, it was almost like it was encased in ice, and it magnified the scribing, and we could actually see it, and we could reestablish the corner properly. So what do we do when we find these things? And this is where County Surveyor's office comes in. Our main goal is to restore and perpetuate these corners. We take these corners and we put them in our control point database, our CPDB. We have about 8,000 corners that we know of in the county that is in our control point database. You may ask, how many corners do we have in the county? Well, we're not exactly sure, but we think it's somewhere 25 to 26,000. So we've got a long way to go. We've been maintaining the system for a very long time. If you look on the wall over here, you can see a map. Did you pass out the map one? Oh, this one here. I want to pass that one out. If you look on this wall over here, you can see the corners in green, and we're going to give you a smaller version that you can take a look at. The little dots in green are corners that are in our control point database. That means we know where they are on the ground. We've put a latitude and longitude on them. We can go back to them with our current technologies. What I'd encourage you to do is take a look at the areas that don't have green in them. The areas in white are the areas we haven't been able to get to yet, and we intend to get to over the next 30 to 40 years. So,
Mr. Chair, what does this one fall under? Try this under you still, Mr. Chair. I would just note the mining area is largely surveyed because there was a lot of wealth up there, okay? And that's where, when you get up into my neck of the woods, most of those were done by, at that time, by mining surveyors.
yes, and there is a lot of areas that you see are white, that don't have control points on them, but the mines know where they are. They have a lot of that information
Oh,
to themselves.
they're not sharing that with you?
It's a sense that the corner doesn't exist because it's been mined out, and it's
Oh.
a mathematical position, which we will be certifying at some point, and they will end up reading on that map at some point. So it's kind of that give and take on how
And-
accurate is their information.
And Mr. Chair, one of the reasons why we embarked on this road of adding surveyors and getting a lot more aggressive on this is when we started identifying mining resources on tax forfeited lands, where 10 feet can be $1 million.
Yes. This time Todd's gonna take over and show some of our requirements that we cover.
Okay, as Nick had mentioned, I'm Todd Hendershot, Deputy Surveyor. I work out of the Pike Lake office in the Public Works Building. I'm going to cover some of the statutory duties that we as county surveyors are obligated and required to follow. I'm also going to go over some other services and functions that the County Surveyor's Office provides to other departments within Public Works and throughout St. Louis County. So with that, our first topic is maintaining and perpetuating the public land survey system. And the first statute there is preserving section corners. This statute basically states that whenever construction, reconstruction, or maintenance of a public street or highway causes the destruction or obliteration of a public land survey corner, the road authority, in this case it would be St. Louis County, will provide for the perpetuation of the section corners along with any reference monuments disturbed, and shall be done so by its licensed land surveyor. The county surveyors are then required to prepare a certificate of location, a government corner, and then record it at the county recorder's office, making it of public record. So the next section covers the perpetuation of section corners. This statute allows for the county to hire a county surveyor to perpetuate section corners that have been destroyed or are becoming obscure. It specifies the requirements of when a certificate of location, a government corner, must be prepared and in the manner of which the monuments and reference monuments must be placed in the ground. This statute also authorizes the county to levy taxes upon all taxable lands within the county for the purpose of preserving, restoring, and establishing section corner monuments. The county may also levy taxes for the modernization of the county land records and the establishment of GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. So our next topic here is maintaining records of surveys, and the statute covers deputies, surveys, and records. This statute allows for the county surveyor to appoint deputies as deemed necessary. It also specifies that surveys of record are required to be maintained by the county surveyor and to be made available to the public. In support of this statute, St. Louis County passed and approved ordinance number 21 back in 1975. And it basically states that all surveys performed within St. Louis County shall be submitted to the county surveyor's office within 30 days of completion and be made available for public inspection. Next slide. All right, our next topic, continuing with statutory duties, is reviewing subdivision plats. And this statute covers approval of plats, surveys, and condominiums. This statute requires that each subdivision plat, registered land survey, and common interest community plat be approved by the county surveyor before recording, and allows for fees to be established for services rendered to the proprietors of said plats. We have one more topic for statutes, and it is performing surveys as required by and in accordance with the laws of the state of Minnesota. And this statute covers the rules for surveys. This statute states, in subdividing townships, sections, or parts of sections as established by the United States Survey thereof, and in restoring lost or obliterated government corners, the county surveyor shall follow the rules established by or pursuant to the acts of Congress, and all such surveys shall be made in strict conformity to the original survey made by the United States. Next slide. Next, I'm going to cover some of the additional functions and services that the county surveyor's office provides to other departments within public works and throughout St. Louis County. For public works, for example, the engineering department, the maintenance department, and the bridge departments. Not only do we preserve and restore the public land survey system, which provides control for all of their department projects, the county surveyor's office prepares easement exhibits, easement descriptions, and exhibits for new right-of-way, utilities, and drainage. And we also assist with mapping right-of-way for design and construction purposes. For the Land and Minerals Department, we provide control and calculations for timber sales, land sales, timber harvest cut lines, lease boundaries, trespass surveys, and access easements. For the right-of-way department, we prepare acquisition surveys, easement descriptions, and provide assistance with the review of right-of-way plats. For the Environmental Services Department, we provide boundary surveys and volume approval. For the Recorder's Office, Title Examiner's Office, and the County Attorney's Office, we review subdivision plats, common interest community plats, and registered land surveys for compliance, and we assist with legal description interpretation and title review. For the Auditor's Office and the GIS Department, we provide tax parcel maintenance, survey reviews, discrepancy resolution and advisement, and the integration of the public land survey system within the GIS parcel fabric. And finally, for the general public, we assist in answering all land survey questions and boundary issues, and assist with the research of documents and surveys of record, and guide the landowners in connecting with the local land surveyor if necessary. In addition, we have recently added public terminals in both the Virginia and the Pike Lake Land Survey Division research areas to assist users in accessing any of our records available online. So with this, I'll hand the presentation back to Nick.
Just a quick question. Do members of the public ever get excited about land issues?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Someday, I mean, the importance of this is integrated into our GIS parcel overlay. Someday, and I'll give you an example. This past summer, family showed up on their parcel on a lake north of here, and showed up to find a mound system right next to their well. And I do mean right next to, Commissioner Jewell, approximately from you to I away. And they had no idea that the well was there when they put in the septic system. And of course, the party that was gone had no idea there was a mound going in while they were absent. The importance of that is when we get our GIS parcel overlay to the point where it needs to be, well locations, septic locations, corner locations, those types of mistakes are no longer going to happen. And in this case, it was something that was rectified by the party that built this septic system, then offered to pay to have a well drilled on the neighboring parcel 50 feet away to have a deep well drilled. That was the answer. But imagine if all this information was available, that mistake would have never happened. And I can tell you it happens far too often out there. So as this thing evolves, we are providing extremely valuable information to not only our property owners, but our cabin owners that are guests here for sometimes only a short period of time every summer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Short snow run where our business plan established in 2012. So in 2012, with the growing utilization of the county GIS land explorer application, the Land and Minerals Department in timber harvesting, lease administration, along with multiple other departments, realized the need for accurate locations for all section corners, aided.
Just went to the Vikings, so let's go to the Vikings here. You really think, because this one...
If you give it to me, I'll take care of it.
Playing with your phone.
Give it to me, I'll take care of it.
The Vikings are still playing, you just lost.
In Commissioner's defense, every time I set down my phone, I set off a YouTube something or other too. You can't even move it.
Please continue.
At that time, the estimated reestablishment of all PLS's corners in the county was 70 to 90 years out. Which is, I mean, that's really what this whole thing is about here. With the assistance of administration, auditors, public works, and the Land and Minerals Department, a detailed document was created to outline program goals and possible steps in order to accelerate the remonumentation efforts down to 35 to 40 years. So we effectively cut this in half. Those main goals were as follows: to maintain the PLS system and corner monuments, support public works, road and bridge projects, support the Land and Minerals Department, review and approve subdivision plats, advise attorneys, recorders, and title examiners, facilitate and improve the GIS system core, and maintain survey records for public access. From this document, a course of action or business plan was established. The business plan was presented to and approved by the county board in 2012. So the business plan was to stabilize property boundaries through the preservation of the PLS system, identify the need for additional technical staff, remonument contracts with private land survey sector partners, increase funding to corner reestablish to the corner reimbursement program, acquire new technology in order to improve efficiencies, and modernization of our survey records. First and foremost was the county's need to stabilize our property boundaries through the preservation of the PLS system. Preston's going to describe how we do that and what the benefit to our public and private owners are.
Does he have more props?
I can pass the same ones around.
Can you?
I got lots of pictures though. And so, real quick, the benefits of remonumenting the PLSS system, I kind of touched on it about it being the basis of property rights. We want to make sure we protect those rights of these landowners as much as possible. It also reduces survey costs to owners in general. If somebody goes into an area that we don't have survey control, where their corners are not known, the cost of survey can be extreme. I mean, I've heard people say start at 10,000 and go from there. And what that does is it gets the people that are really interested in getting a survey done, they'll actually say, okay, we'll keep going. Most people will bow out at that time. So it really reduces the cost of the landowner. Helps to resolve legal disputes and misunderstandings. I have a slide that shows that here in a minute. Encourages the commercial development by providing needed infrastructure. We've been talking about assets, we've been talking about infrastructure. We view corners as assets and infrastructure because it protects the public as a whole. It also improves the accuracy in the taxation management. Commissioner Nielsen alluded to the fact that we integrated into the GIS systems. It helps us determine more accurate areas for taxation as well. It makes it better for the public to know that they're getting taxed on the proper property. I'm going to zip through this slide in the interest of time. We'll go right on to this one here, which I kind of alluded to. Here's an area where the Land and Minerals Department said we think we have an issue here. What you'll see is, go back to our map on the wall where we say we look for those certified corners. You don't see any certified corners in this area. That's because we don't know where those are. Now, if you look on the left, the area over here is private property, over here is tax forfeited. In the middle, there's some sort of activity. If we zoom in on the map, we see that there's some pretty big buildings over here. There's, this looks like a house, this looks like a garage. But again, if we don't know where the corners are, we don't know where this line is. The question we have to ask ourselves, is this line correct? I'll tell you right now, it's not. Is there even a trespass? Is it possible that this line is over in here somewhere? We don't know that until we get out there and we survey it. What you'll see here is here's what happens when we get out there. We survey it, we certify the corners, we put a position on them so that we know where they are. And as you can see down here, that corner is at least 100 feet different from what the parcel area and parcel data is telling us. Same with up here. And as you can see, not a single one of the corners as restored actually lines up with the parcel data. That's normal. We know that. We've known that from the inception of the parcel data. But now we can take this information, and we can overlay it on the map, we can give it to the people that need the information, and now the Land and Minerals Department can go ahead and they can deal with this landowner, and they can deal with this line with certainty. We now know where the line is, it can be laid out on the ground, and then they can start to deal with landowners. Before that, it's anybody's guess. People will argue left and right over where the line is without knowing actually where it is. That's where having a survey completed really solidifies that and reduces those issues. Again, we go back to Jovi and his stake, our Halloween stake that we found. We've got 25,000 corners left to do. We know where about 8,000 are. Those are the ones that we focus on so that we can get them into the GIS system and then publish that data for people to be able to utilize them.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Look, one of the things that when we talk about surveying and the questions that arise from this, at least up in the mineralized area where mining companies had surveyors out there doing these things, the original survey of Failed Township did not include Pleasant Lake. Pleasant Lake is roughly 3.5 miles long, almost 4 miles long, because a lot of the original surveyors that did surveys up there, they were heavy drinkers and the weather wasn't always conducive. So many times they drew maps from inside of their tents. And that's what these guys are up against when they get into an area like Failed Township, as an example, which is an area that I'm very familiar with. How do you miss a 3.5 mile long lake, which is approximately a half mile wide? How do you miss that in a township? But they did. Does not even show up on the map. So, notorious drinkers hired by people that paid them to survey. And they brought them back surveys, not always accurate surveys.
And a lot of it is because they're getting paid by the mile, and all they need to do is return the survey back to the GLO and get it approved, they get paid.
Right.
You know, if they showed they did something, they skip the lake. There's many lakes in St. Louis County that do not exist on the GLO survey. It's amazing. If you ever look on a Land Explorer and you see the lines, the property lines, taxation lines going through the lake, that's a lake that did not show, generally it's a lake that did not show on the original survey, is why that's like that. So they're prevalent.
And Mr. Chair, I don't know, Pleasant Lake may not have been there when they did it in 1900. That's possible too, I guess. All right.
So Chair Jugovich, just a quick, so the log you passed around is from 1875, is when that survey was done. But not all of Minnesota had been surveyed by that time, right? So there's a continuing, they're surveying places that people around or whatever, and then it's expanding out from that, right?
There's actually, in St. Louis County, there's into the 1900s, I don't believe the last date, but I don't think they hit 1910. 1910, around that era, so the last report was through in St. Louis County, there was some. But otherwise, other areas in the state were done actually earlier.
Well, so I know my grandfather surveyed the Kawishwi in 1919 and the winters of 1919, 1920, and 2021. So, I mean, I had always assumed that was the first survey of the Kawishwi, but
And it could possibly be, depending on what county it is, and you'd have to look into the records to find out. Lake County, I mean, the original surveys in St. Louis County, like I said, they ended in 1910, but they continued to survey into the, I'd say, the 20s probably. So.
All right, so in our first action item from our business plan is identify the need for additional technical staff. So prior to 2012, the division held 15 positions, a county surveyor, 1 deputy surveyor, and 12 technicians. To help the division take on additional projects and widen its advisory role in St. Louis County, we added 1 deputy, one senior technician per office for a current total of 19 positions within the division. Its 2 deputy positions were funded by the land department, and 1 of the technician positions was funded by the data integration fund. So in the Virginia office, you can see, I'll just go through these quick, because we have a deputy surveyor, Preston Dahl in Virginia. We have 8 technicians, 2 open technician positions, and 2 of those are working towards an LSIT, which is a land surveyor in training. In Pike Lake office, we have Todd Hendershot, deputy surveyor there. We have 7 survey technicians. We have 2 technicians there that have passed their LSIT, and 1 open deputy position in Pike Lake. This model has shown improvement in the division as we have realized an increase in efficiency of project throughput with the correct, highly trained technical staff. To this end, we are currently working with Public Works, Admin, and HR to create a licensed land survey class, a position class. And with this job, Todd and Preston will have the ability to promote a survey technician that has acquired their Minnesota land survey license. So those LSITs, when they become licensed, will be able to hopefully leverage that license for professional review and increase the efficiency of our division, our department. That's where we're going with that.
This is a big deal, this LSIT. It's a big accomplishment, and we're working on a lot of fronts to work that into the organizational model and reflect that.
Because we want to keep these folks.
That was just my question was going to be, so then we lose them to the private sector.
Correct.
Yes, that's our goal is we've trained these guys, they're highly technical. We want to keep them, we want to retain them for St. Louis County if possible. If nothing else, if they have to go, we'll have some very highly trained staff we're working with on the private side.
Right.
It's always an upside down. So the second action item was to administer remonumentation contracts with the private land survey firms. So here's kind of a tally of what we have. So the remonumentation contracts that we set up was so we have $300,000 a year from the mineral royalties funds, which is allocated for this purpose yearly. And so we've been administering 4 to 6 contracts yearly. The planning of these contracts takes into consideration the future mining interests of St. Louis County and what we hold for our mining interests, timber harvest, public works road projects, and general voids in the Plss system, as you can see, the white areas on the map. The administration and careful review of these projects has shown great success in the program, and with 150 plus corners certified yearly. With the continued support and funding of the program, we'll keep those goals on track. So the next issue enters is to increase funding to a corner reimbursement program. This program, so the primary focus of this program is to obtain good quality corner certificates with the corner monuments which do not presently have location corner certificates on them in St. Louis County. The program is funded annually with $40,000 from the Mineral Royalties Fund, again, and provides financial assistance to private sector land surveyors for PLS corner perpetuation, which occurs during the course of a private land survey. So when you hire someone to do a land survey and they're required by statute to file corner certificates, this reimburses that cost, part of that cost that they're throwing on to the landowner. The reimbursement of the initial program was only $150 per certificate. Under the new plan, additional funding was used to increase this payout to $400 per corner if geodetic coordinates or GPS coordinates were provided, hopefully increasing the numbers of certificates being submitted. This has shown a limited improvement in participation due to the upswing in the economy, increasing the workload on the private sector, and our remonumentation projects most likely taking priority. So all those contracts we've been putting out for the private sectors, they're getting a higher payout for those, so they're going to work on that first, really, is what's happening. The fact that $400 is still not enough to cover the cost to the landowner for corner certificates. We've been discussing these changes to the program with private sector surveyors, with the thoughts of trying to make this more successful in the future. You know, increasing the funding to it, just any options that they can come up with to try to help with this.
So really, that was in the business plan, that was the three-pronged approach to increasing the number of corners that we could do each year. One is increased in-house capabilities by 4 additional staff, the outside contracts with the private sector partners, and then this, what we call the bounty program, paying for additional corners that are being done through surveys already being done for someone else. So when folks say, well, you know, we could take those mineral royalties and put them somewhere else, I mean, the reality is that was part of the three-pronged approach that we originally put in place here to make this happen. It's a very important piece.
So almost all the final on that is we decided to also do that we were going to need some new technology in order to improve our efficiencies. So in 2013, we appropriated mineral royalty funds with approval of the board to buy GPS equipment for the division, so that we had, as I say, just updated GPS. We've also been working on making ourselves more efficient with ATVs, snowmobiles, Argos, whatnot. We've bought a high-resolution printer and scanner, both in Pike Lake and Virginia, to help with our next item, which is modernization of survey records. So actually, Preston is going to come back in again, and he's going to talk about our Survey Explorer, which is being of our records manager.
Mr. Chair, probably wouldn't be appropriate to ask him if he had props, would it?
I got pictures.
Pictures.
And what I will say is I'm going to skip through a lot here because if you look at our presentation here, here's the first half and here's the second half, and we're already over our allotted time. So I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but I will, in all honesty, if anybody's interested in seeing what we've been doing with our records modernization, please come and see me in my office in Virginia. We're very proud of what we've come up with here.
This is very cool stuff.
Yeah, I do presentations on this. I actually have been invited to do a presentation out in California for this, for what we've done here and how we modernize these records. It's a pretty cool thing. This is our records room in Pike Lake. As you can see, we have all kinds of different records. They range from field books, thousands and thousands of field books, not thousands and thousands, probably thousands of field books. That's what these are. They're just little field tablets. These books over here, they're about that big by that big, and they weigh probably 45 to 50 pounds. They're really heavy. They're actually very difficult to handle. We've gone through the process of scanning those with high resolution images for the reason that we need to restore these corners. We need the local surveyors to have access to these records so that they can do private surveys and make sure that they have all the information available to them. So in 2000, our office started indexing all of the records that we had, and we were able to utilize that index to start this record scanning process. In your packet, you'll see a timeline of what we did and how this is progressing. Basically, from the 1800s on, we've been tasked with maintaining these records. And in 2000, we started indexing them all into one complete index. And then, for those of you who are in this room, I believe Commissioner Nelson, Mr. Boyle, I believe you were in the Committee of the Whole meeting when we talked about acquiring the H.P. Steinbach and Duluth engineering records. We used that acquisition to jumpstart this program and show how valuable it could be. And what we did is we acquired those records, scanned them with a high resolution scanner, indexed them, added them into what we call our Survey Explorer, and now they're fully available to the public. And we use that as our kind of platform to kickstart this program. And it's been so successful that in 2017, we've had two survey companies, actually donate their records back to St. Louis County because we're doing such a good job maintaining these. TKDA donated all the SALO records, which is where the HP Steinbach and Duluth engineering field books came from. But also Bear Island Survey up in Ely, they're an active company. They're still working. They gave us all of their records because they like what we're doing so much. So what is a Survey Explorer? It is a web map that's optimized for survey research. It's like many other web maps that we have here in St. Louis County. We won't go into great detail, but you'll go in there and you can get survey information. It's designed by and for surveyors to get high quality resolution scans of our survey records. Here's a copy of a certificate of location of government corners. I keep talking about that CPDB stuff. It's all available here. Here's a copy of one of those HP Steinbach field books. This is actually readable. Lots of times you can't read them because most people scan them in a low resolution black and white. We go with 600 DPI full color images.
And those scanned documents, actually, some of them you can read better the scanned document than you can the original because
Yes.
it's picking up additional shading and other things.
Yes, and then you can manipulate the images to pull out pencil markings and all kinds of different things too as well. I mean,
So, just out of curiosity, what makes the Steinbach or the TKDA books, the SALO books, so valuable? I mean, does anybody can draw something in a book and data
They're
of
original
1982?
surveys.
a lot of these track back to the original surveys. They give you that evidence that you put on your location, certificate of location of government corner, that links you directly to the original evidence. When it comes to corner restoration, it's pretty easy to go out and say, I found a corner, but to link that back to say, this corner can be very difficult. The notes allow us to do that. And the HP Steinbach and Duluth engineering, so yes, I did have props again. So the HP Steinbach and Duluth engineering books have a lot of that information because they were active in the late 1800s through the 1930s, 1940s. There's very few records of that remaining that are outside the county's jurisdiction. Ordinance 21 surveys we talked about, they are now available and online via the Survey Explorer as well. The St. Louis County subdivision plats. This was what our plat used to look like. We started scanning them, and now this is what they look like. This is something we took on as surveyors because we feel these are such valuable images and they're so useful. And I just have some a real quick comparison here. Won't go through it, but basically you can read this one, you can't read that one. That's the takeaway from that slide. So our Survey Explorer, quick highlights. We got 100,000 lines of records in our database. 75% have been imaged. That's a pretty good goal in about 3 years. We've done a really good job. It's increased the efficiency of our internal research. Think about the time it takes me from Virginia to come down here to do research and then go back home. Just that efficiency upgrade alone has been tremendous. But think about that from the vantage of a local private surveyor. What does that do for us? Well, it reduces the cost to the local landowner, but it also reduces the cost of the county overall because we have these remonumentation program. With this remonumentation program, we can cast a wider net, we can get more vendors that are going to be bidding on these projects. And now that evens the playing field, it brings down the cost per corner on our remonumentation projects as well. Again, I alluded to it, TKDA and Bear Island have donated their records. Bear Island flat out told us 5 years ago that would never happen. He wouldn't even have considered it unless we implemented this program. And we even have started building relationships with outside users. DNR is donating records. DNR Minerals is donating records. We're working with the foresters. We're working with all kinds of different agencies that we hadn't been working with before because of the way that we've been maintaining these records. So I'm just going to go through one very quick example as best as I can here about why survey records matter. Here's one of these HP Steinbach field books, 1898. And I'll read this to you because it's hard to read, but observation, from the southwest corner to the northwest corner of section 31, the distance is 2292. We all know a mile is 5280. That mile is 2292. There's 3,000 feet missing here. okay? Most people would be worried about that, but surveyors would go, okay, that's what it is, because this is that original survey. This corner position holds. This was 1898. These surveyors were noting that for us so that we could utilize it in the future. In 1915, the county board, similar to you folks in here, commissioned a survey of the south 4 miles of the township. And if we zoom into the south half of 31, or the south half of this township, you'll see section 31, there's 2,289 feet. That's within 5 feet of what they're reporting. So this distance, these two corners haven't changed. The distance is reported differently, but the corners are in the same spot. We fast forward to today, we look at the County Survey Explorer, we see that interesting looking trapezoid of the section, and we find that the distance is now 2231. We have certificates of location of government corners on all of these, which trace us back to that original note, that original corner position. It's probably the best I can come up with as far as tracking it back, just because it's such a huge difference. And this is, to go to your question, do landowners have issues with this? Yes, they do. This is a big issue. Trying to explain to someone that they don't own 40 acres, like it says on the original survey plat. You understand. And you know.
That one guy.
Yeah. Trying to explain to them, maybe they only own 10. That's a very difficult conversation to have. We have it quite regularly. This is another example. I won't go through it in the interest of time, but essentially, here's what the parcel data looked like when it got delivered, and after applying survey records and survey principles, you'll see that it looks more like this. Much more accurate. These two lines are supposed to be the same. So we're just trying to do the best we can to update all the information that we have. Again, County Surveyor's Office, we're here to maintain and perpetuate the public land survey system, maintain the records of surveys and perform surveys required by and in accordance with the laws of the state of Minnesota. Do you want to take this off?
So our main, the main thing to take away on this is from everything we're saying is that we don't move corners, we can't move corners. We are reestablishing, we remonument the corners from the original survey. You know, when anybody asks you, county surveyors moving lines again, moving corners, that's not what happens. We have a directive to reestablish the original positions of corners. That's the only legal position for a corner section, quarter section, a meander corner. And if nothing else, that is really, you know, it's hard to explain that to a landowner that's coming in that has an issue. You know, we do that all the time. If you have somebody that's pushing that fact or has an issue, bring them to us, send them to us, or bring them to us with you, and we'll, you know, we're glad to walk through with people. So, County Surveyor's Office progress, we had 25.5 corners in our approximation, 8,000 corners have been certified, 17,500 corners remaining. Quite a task. So currently we're averaging 350 plus corners certified annually by the internal staff. Remonumentation contracts and a reimbursement program add another 150 corners for a yearly total of about 500 plus corners, which is a huge number. I mean, that's where we get our 35 to 40 years to finish this. We've been recognized by our peers as a leading example of remonumentation efforts in the state, within the state. I threw that in there because we were just at a conference, and twice during that conference, we had St. Louis County thrown up, you know, our name thrown up about what we were doing and trying to model what we're doing after. And it's been great. We've been moving fast. So with continued funding support, be able to realize these goals and continue it moving. So that's all we have today. Any questions on that?
Mr. Chair, when I came on this board, this was one of the priorities that I talked about out in the community. And I have to tell you that rural landowners really understand the importance of this. And that's just the bottom line. There's a lot of rural landowners out there. They all understand how important this is. And they're standing back watching what we're doing. I know it's an investment. I know it's monies that, you know, some would argue are better spent elsewhere. I will tell you that if you want to bog down our legal system, discontinuing this process is one of the quickest ways of doing it. Because then every one of these land disputes is going to end up in court with the judge making a decision between two people that have different opinions. And once that judge makes that decision, it's done. That's done. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that line has been established by the judge. It's much more appropriate that these lines are established by certified land surveyors. And the judges pay attention when our county land surveyors are present. They just plain do. And I know that from conversations with the judges in the Virginia courthouses over the years. And believe me, Lake Vermilion, when we talk Lake Vermilion, and when it was, you know, being assessed at $1,000 to $1,500 a foot, meander points and all these other little things that you never hear about, they were being talked about nearly every day in court. So this is an effort to not bog down our legal system too, as well as to get these records perpetuated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we're doing 350 a year. So that would mean 45 to 50 years to complete this. Am I right?
That 350 plus a year is our internal staff. There's 500 plus a year with the other combined programs.
So still two times.
Yeah, it is. And the one thing too that doesn't take into account, a few of these corners are in the boundary waters, which, you know, is probably our last stop.
Right.
Really? We've joked that maybe it's a retirement project or something. But this, we're continually pushing ways to make the contracting more efficient. You know, we boxed out areas, when we say boxed out, using range lines and township lines first. We set out contracts for that so that we have areas set up where we can put a contract out to just complete a township as efficient as possible. So now we're looking at, in the next few years, to where we will be letting out projects that will darn near complete a whole township in one contract, which is huge. I mean, and the time savings that shows.
And Commissioners, if I may, imagine in a county with 1 million plus acres of federal land and nearly 1 million acres of our own, then add 1 million acres of state land, and none of them are interested in really paying us back for doing some of these things. I'll tell you, some of the biggest disputes we're having right now are with private surveyors up on federal lands. Vermilion River, I can point at places up there where they're just causing havoc, and it's their own private surveyors. And the feds, when they get a survey done by a private surveyor, they call that law. They call that law. It's an opinion. That's really what it is. But if the feds engage a surveyor, the feds call that law. And that I find disturbing. Mr. Chair, I also would like to do this, and I don't know if we do this through your chairmanship, Commissioner Jewell, or through Environment and Natural Resources, but I think the time is right for the St. Louis County Board to make a formal request of our mining companies, asking them for all of their survey records. I think we should ask. If they tell us no, okay, but I think we should make a formal request, given the fact that many of our couple of years ago now, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, most of our fee holders went away with the acquisition by Phillips 66. So we should also inquire with them and just ask. And in some cases, if we ask, and I don't know, where you guys are at, but I mean, I'm willing to do that or bring that forward as a county board initiative if there's a desire on your department to have those records.
I think some pressure towards that would be good. I do believe that, prior to me working in St. Louis County and in the private side, I worked pretty much in all the mines that exist now. So I have knowledge of most of their records and what they have in place. And I would be able to help facilitate that, and, you know, would definitely be able to use that help if needed. In areas that need us, I do know that some of the mining records, we have everything that we have at this point.
Commissioner Yugovich or Commissioner Jewell, I would ask either one of you to initiate that coming to the board, that we start making these requests, perhaps working with our county land surveyor to really formalize the request so that we're asking the right questions. I don't want to ask the wrong questions. I want to ask the right questions.
I just wanted to comment quickly and thank you for the hard work to pull this together. The extraordinarily amount of great work that's been done in the last 5 years. We've had 400 outside contracts. We've got another 400 over the next 2 years. We continue to build a team. We're doing our 350 internally we're doing 350 remonumenting. We're dealing with the public day in, day out, supporting a number of departments within St. Louis County. It's one of those unseen, behind the scenes, I guess, functions that I was so pleased that we would have some time today to hear more about, and a tremendous job. And the comment about working with people about land, that's an emotional topic for all of us. Your buildings, your property, and it's not easy, especially when you're doing a translation. A mile is now 2,200 feet instead of 50, whatever, 100 feet.
By Wabick?
By where? By Wabick. I did graduate.
5,280.
Thank you. This is why he's a commissioner in the chair of Public Works. But I think this is one of those functions where we've got almost 20 staff that are really at a premium to attract. So we're working hard to not only attract these skilled professionals, but retain them. We're working on our organizational model. Jim's been working with that with Jim Gottschall and Nick, obviously, as the surveyor. But this is the backbone of a lot of what we do, to your point, Commissioner Nelson. And I'm just, I couldn't be more pleased that there's a little bit of exposure, a little bit of visibility that you guys have as a result of this workshop. So thanks for sticking around and hanging in there, and for the hard work and for taking on those tough times of trying to work with our landholders, property owners, because it can get very emotional. I've been in a couple of those sessions. You do a wonderful, wonderful job in trying to get to a good answer once the issue's been identified. And it's hard to think back to 1850 for a corner stake and as ruling somebody, and you know, the property title has passed, 15 times in between, and it's been wrong each and every time. And then you finally get there. So, but this is going to be great, and it really helps with our all of our external access to the portals, to the other land information, survey information systems. It's really great.
Commissioner Nelson.
Mr. Chair, one more time. Those props are almost as warm and fuzzy as one of those dogs in public safety. I would like to see, sometime when we have a slow news day or a slow news week, I would like to see something where we initiate an article on something like that and let people know what we're out there doing. Again, like I said, I think those steaks are almost as warm and fuzzy as a German Shepherd puppy.
I think you were a surveyor like us.
Yeah.
You just saw when we found that one on Halloween, I was jumping and hitting and
Really?
That one you found under the road the other day. Incredible.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you, commissioners, and administration, and Don, for sticking it out.
And then we'll set Brian up at a committee of the whole at some point.
Absolutely, yeah.
Special time.
No.
He can come to each of our individual homes.
That can be next Tuesday.
But no, we really appreciate it.
Whenever you want to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Yugovich, thank you very much. Good day.
Thank you.
A lot of information.
See, if I catch you on a Sanchez reached